Lacey Marie Buenfil was a 25-year-old from Altoona, Florida. She had a new job and was the mother of 3. On December 27, 2011, she was allegedly with Terry McDowell in the Ocala National Forest. Their truck got stuck in the middle of nowhere. Lacey walked for help. She was never seen again. I'm Ed Densel, and this is Unfound. Do authors realize they've written something profound or lasting when they've written it? When Tolkien wrote, "Not all who wander are lost." Stephen King, "Get busy livin' or get busy dyin'." Mary Shelley, "Nothing is so painful to the human mind as a great and sudden change." And Billy Shakespeare, "All that glitters is not gold." Did they know how transcendent those words would be at the time? Probably not. Because I'm guessing these lines are memorable because they don't feel scripted or processed or contrived. They just kind of happened. It also helps that the words ring true. Whatever the case, surely Lewis Carroll could have never guessed that a short sentence he penned back in 1865 would end up becoming a popular saying, almost to the point of becoming a cliché, amongst those who are trying to solve mysteries. Yet, here we are. And today we have the best example of that saying all of you know so well. A young woman allegedly goes missing in a forest, kind of like Alice. But information collected contradicts that story. However, the rumors generated by those possibly involved contradict each other. So how do we figure out what happened and go up the rabbit hole? And now a summary of the case. This is brought to you by my friend Megan Goodsite, charlieproject.org. Lacey Buenfil, for most of her life, was on the right path. She was a friendly but possibly a bit naive girl who might have trusted people a little too much. But at 15, she met the boy who would be her main squeeze for almost the next 10 years. They had a great relationship. They had 3 children together. He worked while she stayed at home with the babies. But then Lacey fell in with the wrong crowd at a job she had gotten. Before long, she and her man weren't a couple anymore. And Lacey moved out. So, on December 27th, 2011, she was with one of the people in this wrong crowd, Terry McDowell, a man many years older than she and a known meth cooker. They were seen on video together at a convenience store that morning. This is the last substantiated public appearance of Lacey. Later that day or night, Terry claims that he and Lacey got stuck in his truck in the Ocala National Forest while doing drugs. She offered to go walk for help since their phones wouldn't work. He agreed. In the meantime, over the next hour or so, Terry managed to get his phone charged and called someone to pull his truck out. Yet once he was back home with his vehicle, Lacey wasn't there. She was never seen again. The following main points have complicated the investigation into Lacey's disappearance. Number 1. Jurisdictional issues in which neither of 2 county sheriff's departments wanted to take the case. Number 2, the amount of contradictory rumors circulating in the Altoona, Florida area, all concocted by meth addicts, none of which seem to point to a solid disappearance scenario. And number 3, the deaths of many of the people in this meth crowd who surely knew what happened on December 27th, 2011. Lacey's friends and family completely reject the scenario described by Terry McDowell. They believe her disappearance was due to foul play. The guest for this episode is Lacey's, for all intents and purposes, mother-in-law, Cindy Fox. Unfound News. There's another true crime podcast here in the Tampa area that I recently discovered. It's called Crimeversation, and it's co-hosted by 2 women who are criminology doctorate students at the University of South Florida. They interview experts from all realms of criminal study. I've been in contact with them, and I'm hoping to appear on their podcast sometime soon. Next, I've been putting out some requests to do speaking engagements at universities and colleges, either to actual criminology majors or to campus clubs that get together to talk anything true crime. If you have any connections to your alma mater that may help me make this happen, please let me know through the Unfound email account, unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. Finally, another article from the Tribune Review in Pittsburgh is coming out this Sunday, and you can also find it at triblive.com. The disappearance this month is of Devin Brown Busetta. She disappeared from the Mount Washington part of the city in 2006. And you can hear my interview with Stephen Huba, who wrote the article, at the end of this episode. I hope you will check it out. Where you can find Unfound. Unfound is on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, iTunes, Podomatic, Stitcher, Podbean, and Spotify. Concerning Facebook, please join us on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern for the Unfound live show on the Unfound page. And thank you to everyone who are new followers on the Podomatic app. The email address, unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. The website, unfoundpodcast.com. The website at Trib Total Media, triblive.com/news/unfound. Unfound is on Patreon at patreon.com/unfoundpodcast. You automatically get access to the private Unfound blog, and you get a free ebook for as little a contribution as $2 a month. This week, I need to thank Lisa and Pamela. And the PayPal account. Just go to paypal.com and do a search for Unfound Podcast at gmail.com. Unfound merchandise, volumes 1, 2, 3, and 4 on Amazon in both paperback and ebook form. Please give them some reviews if you've bought them. The playing cards at makeplayingcards.com. Just do a search for Unfound Podcast. Search for almost all of Unfound's cases at myshopify.com. Just do a search for Unfound. And then please mention Unfound on all true crime Facebook pages and other websites and forums. Thank you. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the mother-in-law of Lacey Buenfil, Cindy Fox. Cindy, welcome to Unfound.
Hi, Ed. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Glad to have you. I need to start here. I've had a lot of mothers on the program. In fact, of any particular category of person, mothers probably are most likely going to be the guest. You, though, are a mother-in-law, which is a first for Unfound. How is it that you have taken this case that is now almost 7 years old, so personally?
Well, Lacey's own mother has not been in the picture in her life. She was raised by her grandparents who are in their 80s. Her dad, however, lives down south, pretty far south. So I felt like I needed to do everything I could do to try to bring Lacey home because of my 3 granddaughters and my son.
And just to be clear, Lacey was married to your son.
And actually, they were not married, Ed.
Oh, okay.
She was like a daughter-in-law to me.
Okay.
She has been involved in our lives since she was 15. Her and Corey never got married, but they did have 3 children together.
Okay, so you were like a mother-in-law.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And because, as you know, at least in Western culture, sometimes there is that, jokes about mother-in-laws, but in this case, it seems that you and Lacey, who is kind of your daughter-in-law, got along very well, and that's why you're still trying to figure out what happened to her.
Exactly.
Okay, it's a very unique situation here, and I wanted to make sure the listeners realize how unique this situation is. Let's talk a little bit about Lacey and your son. How did they meet, and how was their relationship?
Well, they met through a friend of Corey's. His name was Jason. Lacey was a good friend of Jason's, and he introduced Corey and Lacey together, like I said, when she was 15.
Wow.
And they were boyfriend and girlfriend ever since. When she turned 20 is whenever they had their first child, Ruby.
Okay. And you said that they had a total of 3 kids.
That's correct. Yep, they have 3. The girls were 1, 4, and 5 years old whenever Lacey went missing.
Okay. Did you think, just to be honest, did you think that Lacey was a good match for your son?
Yes, very much so. They were soulmates. You could just tell they were just so good together.
Mhm.
From the beginning into the till the now at the very end, things did change a little bit, and that's why we're in the predicament
Mhm.
that we're in right now
Right.
because they kind of grew apart a little bit. You know, Lacey was a stay-at-home mom for all of the girls' lives. You know, and then she decided that she wanted to go get a job, and things kind of revolved and went from there. So things changed. And
How
I know
would
we'll get to that later.
We will, we will. What kind of person was Lacey? Her personality and what kind of mother was she and how was she to your son?
Lacey was absolutely the just sweetest, kindest soul. She trusted everybody. She loved everybody. Very naive, very kind, great mother. Her children were her whole world. She loved her babies, and her babies loved her. Lacey was so sweet.
Mhm.
She was a dancer. She was actually a ballet dancer, and she was supposed to be Snow White at Disney. And
Hmm.
she never got to do that. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Did you get to see her and your son very often? Did you live close together? Did you spend a lot of holidays together?
We did. We did. We spent every holiday together. Actually, Lacey and Corey lived with me for a little while, probably for a couple of years, and then they moved on and got their own home. And then we got together not as often, you know, as what we were before, but we still got together a lot. We've always been very close. Our families have.
Okay. So she and your son met, I guess, like you said, when she was 15. So they knew each other and were together for quite a while before she disappeared.
Yep, 10 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So you said that things were good for a while, and then things started to fall apart a bit. Do you remember that when it was happening? I mean, were you shocked by that?
I do.
What?
I was yes, I was I was very shocked. In the beginning, Lacey went to school and she got a certification to be a CNA, and she went to work at a heart doctor there in the villages, and then decided that was her first job because, like I said before, she was a
Hmm.
stay-at-home mom.
Yes.
And then Lacey's mother had passed away, and like I said earlier, Lacey never knew her mother. Her mother had a lot of problems with drugs, and so her grandparents raised her. Well, her mother had passed away. So every hope that Lacey ever had of getting to know her mother or getting to help her mother, the hope that
Mhm.
she had in her heart was shattered. And that's whenever things kind of took a turn. And Lacey went and got a job, and then she went and got a second job at a restaurant in the villages that they had a bar in the restaurant. And Lacey never drank. She was not a drug. She never used drugs. She never drank alcohol. She just wasn't, you know. And
Mhm.
she started hanging around after work with coworkers, and they were drinking. And for the first time ever, she started drinking and having a good time, and it started causing problems, you know, because she would come home inebriated or drunk, you could say, and waking up the kids, and it just wasn't a good situation. And so they ended up splitting ways, and that's what happened in their relationship. And then from there, it just kind of went downhill. And within, you know, a few months, Lacey's gone.
What was
No
your
way to fix
son?
anything.
Yeah, what was your son telling you at this time? I know that you were close friends with her, but he's your son. And if you can, what was he saying to you about, she changing as a person? Did he ever offer up any reason as to why these changes came on?
No, he didn't know why. He just, you know, we all just assumed that it was because her new friends were hanging out and drinking at work. So she
Mhm.
decided to kind of hang out, and she started having fun, you know, and doing things that she was never able to do because she became a mother at 20, you know, and
Yeah.
was with Corey since she was 15. So, you know, things just kind of spiraled from there going.
Yeah.
And as far as Corey, the only thing that really bothered Corey was her coming in, drinking and waking up the kids and being loud. And Corey's father was an alcoholic, and I got my children out of that situation at a young age, but probably not young enough, you know. And
Mhm.
he just wasn't going to live that way. with his children.
Mm.
And so him and Lacey talked about it, and they decided that Lacey would move on, and she did.
How long would you say this time frame was? Maybe from the first time that maybe, something, questionable popped up as far as her behavior to them splitting up. How much of a time frame are we talking there, do you think?
Oh, probably maybe a month, maybe
Wow.
2 months at
Very
the,
fast. Very fast.
uh-huh. Oh yeah. And then Lacey moved out, and her grandparents had gotten her a trailer to live in.
Mhm.
And I'm going to say 3 months later, Lacey's gone.
Wow.
Nowhere to be found.
Wow.
Yeah.
What
So she never
if
had
you
the
had a chance if you had a chance to talk to the grandparents, what did they say about their granddaughter's change in behavior and change in habits?
They were very concerned also, because they said when Lacey wasn't doing right, then they wouldn't hear from Lacey. If Lacey was doing wrong, and that's when we started thinking that there was more than just drinking involved. But we never saw or knew Lacey to do anything.
Mhm.
But then the grandparents said that they wouldn't hear from Lacey for a couple of weeks at a time.
Yeah, that's not a good
She
sign.
avoided them, I should say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I know to this day you've told me that your son Corey, to this day in 2018, is very broken up about Lacey, and especially
Oh,
Lacey's
it's horrible.
disappearance. Can't talk about it.
Yeah, nope,
Can't talk
it's
about it.
horrible. He's just yeah, very dark. He just doesn't want to. It's really bad for him.
Yeah,
And with the three girls, each one of the girls are a spitting image of their mom in their own
wow,
special way, as he calls it.
wow, right.
But we have opened up in the last couple of weeks a little bit more, and we're talking more about it. And he's doing better. The last
Okay,
couple of weeks, doing better out of
okay,
7 years.
okay, okay.
Yeah,
All right, yes. And the listeners should know, just for the record, even though we talk about how relationships cause disappearances unfound, it's the number one reason that disappearances happen. But in this case, your son is not a suspect at all. And of course, the listeners are going to hear about this, but your son is not a suspect at all in Lacey's disappearance. Not at all. Wasn't in the area,
correct.
nothing. No
No,
chance. No
no,
chance at all.
no,
Okay.
no,
And in
no.
fact, and in fact, we're going to get into this. He was actually a little confused why he wasn't questioned at the time, and
Yes,
that just goes
yes,
to the whole
yes.
investigation itself that we're going to talk about. Okay.
Yep, yep, yep.
Okay. So you managed, once they broke up, you still managed to stay in contact with Lacey even after she and your son broke up.
Yes, me and him did actually
Mm-hmm.
stayed in contact with Lacey,
Okay.
and mainly because of the children.
Of
You know,
course. Right. Right.
and
Right.
because we loved her no matter what she was doing, we still loved her. We might
Yeah.
have been upset with the choices that she was making, but I always loved Lacey.
Okay. And just before we get into, because we're going to get into some names here very quickly, many names. When was the last time you saw or talked to Lacey before she disappeared?
That would have been around. I'm going to say probably May of that year. I got deployed to Ohio, so
Mm,
I was actually working in Ohio in May. That would have been the last time I saw Lacey. Was in May. I talked to
mm.
her while I was working, but not very much.
Okay, and she didn't so May, so like 8 months later, you went quite a
hmm
while without, of course, seeing her. Of course, you weren't in the state of
7
Florida.
months. Yep.
Yeah, seven
Yep.
months you didn't see her, but over that 7 months you didn't talk to her either.
Yep. I talked to her a few times on the phone,
Okay,
not very much.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. All right. And when would you say that you talked to her in December of that year, maybe just to wish her happy Merry Christmas or something, or not?
I had talked to her earlier in the month about
Mhm.
Christmas plans, what they were going to do.
Okay. Okay. All right, because the official date for her disappearance is December 27th, 2011. All right,
That's
and
correct.
okay, so but you were out of town on work that you still do to this day. Okay.
Yes.
And how would you portray that last conversation you had with Lacey? Positive? How did you feel about it?
Yeah. It was positive. Everything was good. I didn't know anything. I mean, she sounded great.
Okay, great. All right, now we're going to go through some names, and I don't know if the listeners want to write some of these people down, but they're all eventually going to play a role in this very long story and somewhat maybe at times a little confusing, but we're going to try to do our best with it regarding Lacey's disappearance. This is not just your run of the mill, straight ahead disappearance case because of all the rumors and stories and people and situations that are involved. But is it safe to say, just overall, Cindy, that these names that we're going to go through, and the listener should know that she has an outline in front of her, so she knows the names that are going to come up. These are most of these names you'd not heard of until after Lacey disappeared.
That's correct. I knew none of these people at all.
Okay, great. But in your research, and the listeners should know, maybe we should talk about this real quickly before we get into that. The listeners know that I went up to the middle part of Florida maybe 6 weeks ago, and you and I actually met. I also met your husband and another
Yes.
woman that was with you.
Yes.
And you have extensive paperwork on Lacey's disappearance. I mean, this isn't something that you've just gotten into because she was your, I'm just going to continue to call her your daughter-in-law, but
Right.
you've become an investigator. You have notebook after notebook after notebook. You showed me the chart with all these pictures. I mean, this is an extensive project that's been on your hands for a few years now.
It has consumed me. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. And the reason it has consumed me is because the sheriffs didn't do their job.
Right.
So somebody had to. I need my granddaughters to know one day that I did everything I could do in my power to bring their mother home.
Right. Right. And the way I would explain it to the listeners, if you've ever seen maybe any of those crime shows, CSI or something, that you ever see them standing in front of like this big board and there's these pictures of different people and there's
Mm-hmm.
lines
Mm-hmm.
connecting.
Mm-hmm.
This is the
Yep.
kind of thing that Cindy put together. In fact, I remember you unfolding it or rolling it out. It was like rolled up like a poster, and you rolled it out, and it completely covered that table we were at that restaurant. It completely covered that
Mm-hmm.
table. In fact, it was so big it rolled over the side of it. It was huge.
Yeah,
You know,
it's about 8 foot long. I'm looking at it
yes,
right now. It's about
yes,
7, 8 foot long. Yeah.
yes. This is real. Cindy is
Yeah.
absolutely telling the truth. And then all of the notebooks that you showed me, and it's just amazing. It's just more information than I've ever seen somebody collect as a private person in any investigation that I've seen personally, and I get stuff sent to me all the time. Okay, so
Right.
having said all that, in the way that you went about finding these names that we're going to talk about, to remind the listeners that you had not heard of any of these people. Lacey, I guess, had never mentioned them. And I'm guessing probably your son didn't know much about these people
None
until
of
I.
them. None of them. Yeah, we knew
Okay.
none of these people. My
Okay.
family knew none of these people whatsoever.
Okay. Even though these people live kind of in the area where you do, not far away.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. All right. We're going to start with a guy whose name has popped up, and we're just going to give the generalities of these people. We'll get into a little depth in a bit, but the name that's most out there concerning Lacey's disappearance is allegedly the last guy that she was with, Terry McDowell. Can you just give a general description of him, maybe his age and just
Yes.
general idea of who he is?
Yeah. What we had learned about Terry McDowell was that he was 51 years old. He had a 25-year-old girlfriend for about a year. Her name was AJ. Terry was a known meth cook in these woods out here in the forest.
Okay.
He had a lot of friends, or a lot of customers, I guess you could say, that thought they were friends.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So he's a man, and he's quite a bit older than the rest of these people we're going to talk about, isn't he?
Yes, and everybody that I have spoke to about Terry, all of the girls just loved him to death. They said that he wouldn't do anything to hurt anybody, but he gave all these little young girls dope. So that hurts them. They don't realize that they're hurting, but that hurts them.
Okay. And when you say he's 51, he was 51 at the time of Lacey's disappearance in 2011.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
All right. Let's move on to the next name. Clarence Chastain, Chastain. Who is he?
His nickname is Skeeter, and he was a friend of Terry's. Now, we were told at the time that Lacey went missing that Lacey and Skeeter were an item, that they had been seeing each other.
Okay. All right. So, and how do you think they met probably through Terry? And we're
That's
going to get.
correct. Yeah, they had to have. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this once again, did your son had never heard of Clarence Chastain or the nickname Skeeter being nobody. It was just somebody new.
No. But I would like to back up to Terry McDowell if I can.
Please.
And what I wanted to say is that Lacey met Terry through this fella named Charlie Williams.
Yeah, please talk about Charlie. Yeah.
That she had met Charlie at the trailer park where her grandparents had bought her the trailer. He had been walking around in the trailer park, and one day they started talking to each other, and then he's the one that ended up introducing her to the south end of the Ocala National Forest, where she met all of these people that we're in reference to now.
Right. Okay. Very good. And this is all things that you have discovered through your own research. This is how you found it. Okay. You just nebbing around like I think it's been excellent. Okay. So we have Terry, we have Charlie, we have Clarence. Chris Thornton is going to play a prominent role later in this program. Who is he?
Chris Thornton, again, is a friend of Terry McDowell's. And what this is, Ed, this is a group of people out there in the woods, and they all do meth. Okay, so far, everybody that we spoke of and everybody we're going to speak of, I was told we're all meth users. Okay, now, I was trying to think what I was going to tell you about Chris Thornton. Okay, Chris Thornton being a friend of Terry McDowell's, when I was in Ohio, again, working, Chris Thornton's girlfriend had called me, and this was the year after Lacey went missing. Mm-hmm. She called me because Chris Thornton wanted me to contact the media and have the media go to Marion County Jail, where he was, because the detectives were not listening to him. He was trying to tell them about what happened.
Okay.
So
Chris Thornton you've portrayed Chris as being kind of like a gopher for Terry McDowell. You know, Chris kind of worshipped the land that Terry walked on, and he would do anything for Terry if Terry asked him to. That's the way you portrayed it to me. Okay.
That's right.
Chris, who's in jail a year later, and like I said, I'm not going to get too deep into this because we're going to talk a lot about Chris later, but he was kind of a gopher for Terry. He would help Terry in cooking meth or going to get stuff and maybe bringing people over, whatever.
Right. And now I also had heard that he bought a gun. I'm sorry, that Josh Jenkins had bought a gun from Chris Thornton on the 27th of December.
Okay. All right. We'll have to remember that. Okay. Who is Randy Evans?
Randy Evans, again, is friends of Terry McDowell's, and he also was Terry McDowell's sister. It was her boyfriend at the time. Okay.
All right. Now we're going to have just three women, just their first names, Jennifer, Brandy, and Venus. Who are they?
Jennifer, Brandy, and Venus were all friends of Terry McDowell's. Venus was Terry's best friend of 15 years. Mm-hmm. Now, Venus had moved to Georgia. She wasn't here, but she came in for Christmas. So she was here at the time that Lacey went missing.
Okay.
Venus is, like I said, a very good friend of Terry's. Venus called my son personally after this happened and told my son that Terry definitely is out of his demeanor and that he has done something to Lacey or with Lacey because it's totally out of his demeanor to act the way he's been acting.
Okay. And Jennifer and Brandy, they were also two, like you say, younger women, maybe around Lacey's age, that were into meth as well.
Yeah. Yes,
Okay.
it was Jennifer Thompson. It was a Brandy, and then also Amanda. They all ran together pretty much. They were always over at Terry's house, especially Jennifer and Amanda.
Okay.
And
And we
Brandy
should be
was in
clear
and
that
out.
all these people we've named so far, they all know each other. They're all running in this
Yes,
gang
yes,
over
yep,
there,
yep.
Altoona, Florida, the southern end, like you said, of the Ocala
Umatilla,
National
yep,
Forest. Yes, all around there, and
yep,
people
and
can look that.
Umatilla, yep,
Umatilla, you
that's
can.
correct.
Everybody can look that up on a map. Okay. And Alicia, is that
Yep.
Terry's girlfriend or Terry's sister?
Terry's girlfriend was Alicia. AJ is what they called her.
AJ. Okay.
Um, Alicia was she was his girlfriend for about a year.
Okay. And she was his girlfriend at the time that Lacey
That's correct.
disappeared.
Now, yeah. Now, also with AJ, his girlfriend, when Terry was in jail, Terry had just gotten out of jail 6 days before Lacey went missing. He had been in jail for a month. Okay,
Yeah.
and that month while he was in jail, we were told that AJ had found another boyfriend. But whenever Terry got out of jail, they ended up getting back together.
Okay. All right, but it was only like 6 days, so who knows where it was going to go. But
That's right. That's right.
was AJ friends with, were these women that we've just named and AJ friends with Lacey?
You know, I don't know that. I can say that there was a girl, Jessica, that was friends with Lacey out there. A girl named Josie that was supposedly friends with her out there. The other girls that we've mentioned, we were told were jealous of Lacey.
Right.
Because
That's why I
Lacey
wanted
had a
to.
car. Yep, she had a driver's license. She had a car, and she had money in the bank, where these girls didn't. All they did, they just stayed in the forest all the time with no driver's license, no car, no money, no job, no nothing.
Wow. Okay. Matt Maynard, who is he?
Matt Maynard, again, a friend of Terry's, and in the group, okay? But Matt Maynard, Matt apparently was around when a lot of this stuff happened. Matt had at his house, in his possession, not in his possession, at his house, in a book, the pages were cut out in the book. And inside this book was a bank debit card envelope. And in this envelope was an SD card that came out of his camera. Okay. He did tell me later that Jennifer, one of the girls that we just talked about, Jennifer Thompson, had his camera and had been taking pictures with his camera. So when he found this SD card, I guess he didn't think that he needed to turn it into the law, so he hides it in a book. Now, his ex-wife now, when she was in prison when Lacey went missing, her name is Misty. When she got out of prison, she was at his house snooping around because she had heard that he had an SD card.
Okay.
So she is looking through everything she could look through, and she found the book, found the envelope, found the SD card. Now, do you want me to go ahead and say what she saw?
No, we're just going to have to, because I know once we say it, that's all the people are going to talk about. They're going to think about.
Okay.
But there was evidence on there that something not very nice was going on that could point us in a particular direction. And once again for the listeners, I know that if it comes out now, that's all you're going to be thinking about. So we want to follow a particular set of facts here before we get to that. And finally, who is DJ Jenkins?
DJ Jenkins is a friend of Terry's. His wife's name is Heather. DJ, again, they just all hung out with Terry all the time.
Okay.
But I think DJ did work. I think he did have a job. I think Matt had a job. But they did hang out with Terry. They were friends with Terry.
And you had mentioned another Jenkins?
Yes, DJ's brother, Josh. Josh is the only one that I can say at this time ever, him and one other girl, were concerned about where Lacey was and why nobody's going to look for her. He just couldn't understand why nobody's going looking for her.
Okay. All right. So we have these people, and I apologize to the listeners, but you really do need to know all these names. There's no way to cut that list down any shorter than that, because there are more names, aren't there? There's many more
Yes,
names,
there are.
but
There are
I've
more
tried,
names.
but we go like through 20 names, and then people were really, really confused. So I tried to keep it to the major players. Let's talk about a few things that went on before Lacey disappeared that you believe that we believe or you believe happened. Let's talk about this. I know this is going to sound funny, but it's not. This bounce house story.
Okay. Lacey's grandparents had bought a small, not a big bounce house, but a small bounce house that you could put in your living room, that size, that the kids could get in and jump in. Somebody had stole that bounce house from Lacey. And it was Michelle, a girl named Michelle, had taken the bounce house out of Lacey's car. And when Lacey found out, Lacey ended up taking it back from Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Michelle, that is one of the girls that beat Lacey up.
Okay.
We were told.
All right. And how so was Michelle friends with these other girls we've already mentioned, Venus?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So they're all like a group together. Okay.
And they,
And and you didn't find this, did you know about the bounce house story before Lacey disappeared, or was that something you found out afterward?
No, that was something that we gathered afterwards by talking to all the people that we talked to out there in the woods.
Wow. Okay. And how long do you think this happened before she disappeared?
Very shortly. Very, very shortly.
So maybe a month, maybe late November.
Not even a month. I'm saying days.
Days. Okay.
Days.
So somebody steals this bounce house right out from her car. She goes to get it back. She takes it back, and then a fight ensues. And Michelle and maybe some of these other girls or young women that we've already mentioned beat Lacey up.
Yeah. Now this time that we're talking about, Michelle Barito, supposedly at a guy named Rocky Penley's house, they were having a party there. That was, let me see, the 26th, I believe, is when the party was.
The day before she disappeared, Lacey disappeared.
The day before Michelle Barito got into a fight with Lacey at Rocky's house, and it was supposedly by the bathroom. She was beating her up. And now Lacey, again, and I was trying to get across what she really was in the beginning of the interview. Lacey was not a fighter. She was too sweet. She was very kind, and a very tiny soul. She was 95 pounds, and she definitely was not a fighter.
Right. Okay, so she got this back, and so there was some ominous things going on before she disappeared from other women, not from men, maybe from men, but there's definitely proof that there were some women in this group of people in Terry McDowell's gang, I guess you'd call it, that had something out for Lacey. Yes. Not only but they stole a house from her, and then when they got it back, they beat her up. So it was like a double whammy there.
Right.
Okay. Something else. Was Lacey raped before she disappeared?
Yes. Now, I say yes. This is what Lacey had actually sent a text message to her best friend that she felt like she had been raped, that she was very sore, and she felt like her ribs had been broke.
And did she mention, when did this text happen before she disappeared? How soon?
Oh, I could actually look back, but I don't have that ad right now in front of me.
Would you say within a couple weeks? With a couple weeks? Or what?
Yeah. Oh, I would say yes, probably within. Let's even back it up and let's say, not very long before like days.
Okay.
Because all of this happened at the same time, within a few days.
Okay. All right. So, and I do have to ask something else. Yeah. Being that Lacey and your son were not a couple anymore, did they get together for Christmas that year? Because she disappeared just a couple days after Christmas. Did they get together for Christmas Eve and anything?
Yes. And now, Now that I want to tell you about Christmas, but before that, I want to go back to that rape that we were talking about.
Okay, please.
We were told that 5 men doped her up and ran a train on her, and they were videoing it from different cameras. So there was 5 guys involved in that. Now, as far as, and I don't know who they were. I don't know the names of who was there. Nobody ever told me names. Okay. But I just know that she definitely was. They told us that she had been raped, and then her friend I actually have copies of the text messages where she was stating that she thought that she had been raped. Then the next day is whenever Terry showed her the video of her being raped.
Right. So they videotaped it.
Okay. They did.
Okay. All right. Now, we're going to come back to that a little later. I do want to ask you, because we need to get into the facts here of what the on the record story is for actually what happened, and we're going to talk about how that's probably not true. I need to ask you about Christmas. Your son, did he see Lacey just a couple days before she disappeared?
Yep. On Christmas Day, the evening of Christmas, Lacey went to Corey's house at 11 o'clock in the morning. No, I'm sorry. She woke up at 11 at a girl named Charlene's house, and she was late to go see the girls at their grandmother's house because that's where they were celebrating Christmas. And Lacey was upset because she woke up too late and she was crying. So she went that evening to Corey's house and spent that evening. She was going to go there and spend the evening with the girls, which was Christmas evening. When she got there, she was sick and trembling and cold and shaken, and Corey knew that she just wasn't right. Something wasn't right. She didn't stay for very long. The girls had made her a Christmas cake. They had cooked a Christmas dinner for her, and so they put it all in to-go containers for her to take with her because she left. And when they found Lacey's car, that Christmas dinner and her cake was still in the car.
Wow.
She never got it out of the car.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Did she, I'm going to maybe say that, were those possibly withdrawal symptoms if she was on something, possibly?
And that's what Corey was concerned with, and he told her by herself that whatever she's doing, she needs to quit.
Yeah.
And he kind of talked to her for a little bit, but she had somebody there with her also, and of course none of them want to hear that if that's what was happening, and they didn't stay long at all.
Right. And we have to remind the
last time they saw her.
Yeah, and then we have to remember the next day could be when the bounce house thing happened with the beating up, and then we're not sure when this rape happened, but it's all in that, and somewhere in there she found time to go see her daughters, but she wasn't looking very good.
Right. And the thing is, the December 27th is when they declared her missing, okay? And that was the last day that she was seen alive by us, which was on the video surveillance at the store.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to talk about that right now.
Okay,
all right, it's for that day, December 27th. Now, you and I have some doubts about some of this before we get the listeners should know, but on the record, if they were to go to NamUs, if they were to go to Charlie Project, other official sites, what is the story about allegedly where Lacey was that day and who she was with?
Okay. At 9:28 that morning, Lacey put a post on Facebook that said, "My life is my wife till death do us part." That was at 9:28. At 9:42 is when they were seen in the store on video.
You're going to have to say who they is who.
The sheriffs found the video at the store, the surveillance video at the Citco. It was on Highway 19 and Highway 42, which is out in Altoona, Florida. It was actually, we drove from Terry's house to that store, and Lacey's text had to have been as soon as they left Terry's house because it took 14 or 15, right to about 15 minutes for us to drive to that store.
Right.
Now, when they got to the store and when they were on video, they bought 3 sandwiches, 2 drinks, some gum, and some toilet paper. That's what they purchased at the store.
Okay. From there, okay, so on the video, once you've seen it, we'll get into how that video was discovered later, but on this video, it's just she and Terry together, Terry McDowell.
That's right. They were the only 2 people in the store.
Okay.
I'm sorry. They were the only 2 people on the video in the store.
Okay. So after that, does anybody have any idea where they went? Did Lacey text anybody after that? Did she call anybody after that? When is the next time that she pops up?
That was the only time. Yeah, no, that was the only time that anybody ever saw or heard from her again. Now, he told the sheriff that him and Lacey were going to the woods to do drugs. Okay? Well, they do drugs at his house, so we didn't understand why they were going to the woods to do drugs, but that's what he told them, that they were going to the woods to do drugs. Now, the store across the street had on their video camera that his truck went north on Highway 19, which is toward Railroad Grade Road, which is where he said that they went to do the drugs.
Right, so that would be in the opposite direction. That would be the opposite direction.
No, it was in the right direction.
Okay, but it was in the opposite direction of where he lives.
That's correct. As far as he lived, if you looked at the Ocala National Forest and where Terry McDowell lived, okay, he lived at the south end of the forest. The Railroad Grade Road is at the northwest end of the forest, as far from his house as he could possibly be into Lake County, not Marion County where he lived.
Okay. So what I'm saying is when they left the convenience store that morning, they weren't headed back toward his house. They were headed toward the forest.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. So what happens next? So this is the video. And once again, we'll get into later how the video is found. But is there any official record of Lacey calling anybody, texting anybody the rest of that day?
No. Never heard from her again. Nope.
Okay. All right. So that is the only. So we know that she was alive on the morning of December 27th, 2011.
Correct.
So they allegedly went up there to do drugs, which would not be a surprise. And allegedly, whenever it happens, whether it happens that afternoon or that night, what does Terry say? He says something about how his truck got stuck. Can you explain that?
Yeah, he actually had told somebody that they had gotten stuck 3 times because they were out riding around. They got stuck 3 times. The last time they got stuck, he could not get the truck unstuck. He told them that the batteries had gone down in the phones, that neither one of them had a charger or a battery, or their batteries were dead. He was going to take some wire off of his truck, hook it to his battery, and hook it to the phone to charge the phones. He said Lacey was scared to hold the phone. She was afraid of the electricity, and so he allowed her to walk off in the woods to go get help.
Okay.
Now, everybody that we talked to about Terry McDowell said that he would never even let the girls leave his camper to go to the mailbox at night, because he was so concerned with their well-being. That's why they said that he would never have allowed her to walk off in those woods by herself.
Either at day or at night?
A day or night, yes.
Okay.
Yes. And Lacey, and I'm going to tell you, she was scared to death of her own shadow. There's no way she would have walked off in those woods.
Okay. So what is the official story then? They get stuck, and she walks off, and he's claiming that that's how she disappeared.
Yeah, and then he's also claiming that he called. Well, he didn't claim it. I talked to the girl that he called, that he needed to be pulled out, that he was stuck on Railroad Grade Road. So this girl that he called was Venus, the girl that was his best friend for 15 years that lives in Georgia. He called her because she was here for the holidays. She was fishing out in a boat on a lake, so she couldn't do it, so she called her sister Lee, and her sister Lee went to try to pull Terry out of the where he was stuck. And when she got there, Terry was not there. So she ended up waiting and never talked to him, so she went back to his house, and he was at his house. And they said that he was burning stuff. He was putting stuff in barrels. He was burning things. He was going back and forth doing stuff. Well, she finally got with her, and they went back to where the truck was. She said she got inside the truck because he needed to get under the truck to do the linkage, to where he could get the linkage fixed, to where they could drive it, to where he could drive it, and she could pull him out.
Yeah.
Okay. So she said when she got in the truck that there was a purse with all the contents strewn all over the floorboard. And there was also a sock right outside the door. And she was adamant about that sock. She said it was a girl's sock, and she just knew that it was Lacey's sock. There was also a piece of equipment that he put in the back of her truck. And she said it was some kind of piece of equipment that attached to a saw, something that attaches to a saw. And it was supposedly Brandy Green's father's tool. And he left it in Lee's truck. And he was panicking about her getting that tool back to him. And he kept saying he had to get it to Brandy's dad. She was afraid that he had done something with that tool, so she hid that tool in her garage so her husband wouldn't see it, because her husband doesn't like her going to the forest because of the dope.
Right. Okay, let's break this down for a little bit. So she goes out, so somehow he does get his phone charged. Somehow. I don't think attaching a wire to a battery would ever charge a phone. They don't even work on the same voltage system. And so that doesn't sound believable to me, but let's just say that somehow his phone was charged. He calls this Venus. She calls her sister. She goes out there. He's not there. Does he ever give an explanation why he's not at the truck? How did he get back to his place?
I don't know. I do know that if you remember in the beginning, we were talking about Brandy.
Yeah.
Okay. Brandy and Jessica and a guy named Fred and Tyler had gone to Chisholm Trail, which is at Railroad Grade Road, to pick Terry up. Okay. They had already gone out there one time, picked him up, took him to his house, took him back out there. Okay. Then they were called again to come get him. So Brandy and Jess took this guy, Fred and Tyler, with them because they didn't want to go back out there again by themselves because they were scared the first time.
So it seems like, once again, this is maybe a little confusing for the listeners. We just have to keep in mind you're throwing a lot of names out there, so please be careful of that. So are we to understand that Terry called Venus, but then he also called these other people to come pick him up? Is there any explanation as to why he would call one group to pick him up and then somebody else to tow the vehicle out? Couldn't he just
I don't know.
Couldn't he just call Venus, who would then, or her sister would come out, and he could just wait there, and the car and him would all be taken back to town all at once?
Yeah, that's what you would think. That's what you would definitely think. But for some reason, he was going back and forth. And remember, it was about 20 minutes from his house.
I know. I've been up there.
Was.
We've been up there. Yes, and I'm going to be talking to the listeners about that myself. All right, let me ask you some more questions, if I could. At any time when he called any of these people, did he ask about Lacey? Because at that point, she would be missing. Did he ask, did you see Lacey? Did you pick Lacey up? When Lee finally did come out to tow the vehicle out, did he say, hey, has anybody heard from Lacey? Did he ever say anything like that you know of?
Yep. Nope. Now, this was, at 1:30 to 2 a.m., is when Brandy and Jess and them went and got him. Okay. Mm-hmm. At 4 to 4:30 in the morning, Terry McDowell and Jessica Snook came back to Terry's house. Both of them were frantic and freaking out. They couldn't sit down. Terry said, shit's gone down. Lacey's missing. We were fighting. I buried my mess on Railroad Grade Road. I put a hat on top of it, and I have to go back there. At 11 a.m. is whenever Lee picks Terry up and his son, and they go back to the truck, and that's when they pulled the truck out. It was 11 a.m. on the 28th.
On the 28th, the next day. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so the truck gets pulled out, and the story is, if we're to believe it, that Lacey, just to break this down very simply, Lacey and Terry are together. Truck gets stuck. She walks off to get help. Meanwhile, he somehow figures out how to get his phone working. And when he gets back to town with the truck or without the truck, whatever, he's there, but Lacey is never seen again. So we're to believe that maybe that she got lost in the forest, which would maybe be easy to do, being that it would have been maybe dark. Even if during the daylight you could get lost out there. I mean, being that I've been out there. And she got lost and something happened. That's the story that Terry McDowell is trying to sell to everybody.
Yes. Now, on the 28th, after all of that happened, the truck, in the PM of the 28th, Venus, his best friend, went to Terry's house. Brandy was on the couch. Josh Jenkins was in the living room with Jennifer Thompson. They were talking about Lacey to Venus. Josh Jenkins is the one that says, how screwed up is this that nobody's looking for her? Terry was in his bedroom, in the bed, listening to them talk, never said anything. Jennifer went to his room, turned on the light, and said that Terry was just laying there staring at the ceiling with a weird look on his face. He never even acknowledged her. So Venus jumped up and told Terry, you better clean this crap up. I'm going to the law to tell them that Lacey's missing. I can't believe you haven't called them. Terry was totally out of character, she said. His demeanor is all wrong. And she told him, what did you do to that girl? Now, the detective told Venus that Terry told them that Venus ran up to him all belligerent, accusing him of killing Lacey. And she said she did not say that. But she knew he did something.
All right, so just to break, once again, to maybe simplify this, is that this is the day after. Most of these people do know Lacey. Maybe some of them like her, maybe some of them don't. We can't forget about this fight from 2 days ago that she got into with some people, and obviously it seemingly has some enemies. It seems like these enemies are women and not men, and we believe that she was raped. But there are these people who were in this house with Terry McDowell. It's like 20 minutes away. And Terry doesn't seem to be concerned that Lacey is missing at all.
No.
Okay. All right, let's, all right. Okay. But Josh Jenkins said he was the one who, brought it up how weird it is that we're not looking for her. And seemingly it sounds to me that eventually nobody did really go look for her.
Right.
Okay. Even though all these people knew her very well.
Yep.
Okay.
She'd been hanging out with them for months, for a couple of months.
All right, so I have it here. None of these people went out that night or the next day. They didn't go in their cars to Ocala Forest. The Ocala Forest didn't do anything, to your knowledge.
No.
Okay. Where was, being that you had already mentioned Clarence, also known as Skeeter, in this? He was allegedly her man at the time. Did he do anything? I mean, when does he pop into this picture as far as her disappearance? Was he concerned? Did he call anybody? Anything?
Not that we know of. The only thing that we found out that he did the day after Lacey went missing was he changed his relationship status on Facebook, that he is now in a relationship with Jamie, who is Terry McDowell's girlfriend's sister.
So allegedly he and Lacey are a thing, and then a day after she disappeared, he's with another woman.
Yep, that's what he put on Facebook.
Okay, we'll come back to that in a bit. All right, so this isn't looking too good. Now, Terry, although he may, and these people may not have gone out to look for Lacey, allegedly in the Ocala National Forest, which is huge. But he did do something. He did call the police, but what did he do when he called the police?
He called the police and told them that he had an abandoned... Now, let me back up. The only reason he called the police is because Venus told him that she's going to the police. So now he calls the police and tells them that he has an abandoned car in his driveway.
And whose car was that?
Lacey's.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not an abandoned car. He knows exactly whose car it is.
You daggum right, he did.
Okay, so do the police show up and what happens?
I'm not really sure exactly what happened. I do know that they went there. They got the information off of the car. They found out that the car was registered to Lacey's grandparents, and they went and talked to Lacey's grandparents at that time.
And when they were over and they looked at this car that was in Terry's driveway or beside his house or whatever it was, and you're saying this is when it was noticed that the food, the cake from Christmas was still in the car. Is this what you're talking about when that was discovered?
Yep. And,
at
and
any
then
point,
the purse that was in his truck, thrown all with all the contents all over the ground, in the floorboard. The purse was back in her car, but it was empty.
Okay, right. And her cell phone is nowhere to be found either?
Exactly. Now, we were told that Michelle stole Lacey's cell phone, too.
Okay. All right. At any point while the police are checking this car out and finding out who actually owns it, do any of the people at Terry's house, if they're still there, say to them, the woman who owns that car is missing? Did any of them say anything like that?
Nope, I was never told that by anybody.
And the police...
Except for Venus, who knew something was wrong. Okay,
but none of these people said anything to the police, like, this car isn't abandoned. This is actually a car of a girl who was with Terry the night before, and now she's missing.
Nobody said anything. They went and found out who owned the car and then went to her grandparents. Okay. And her grandparents told the police that Lacey was driving the car.
Okay, but he never said anything about, did the police ever ask him, well, where is she?
Yeah, no, now yes, they did ask the grandparents that.
Oh, well, did they ask Terry that? Did they ask Terry that?
Oh, see, I don't know. I don't know what they asked him.
Okay. And I know you've had some, and I know that the investigation has not been very good for a lot of different reasons that we're going to get into, mainly having to do with drugs and things. But it just seems like a couple questions could have really taken this in a better direction. Okay, so they don't even bother to ask where the owner of the car is, allegedly. Okay, as far as we know.
Because they didn't know. Yeah, that's why they ended up going to the grandparents. And the grandparents then told them Lacey was the driver of the car, and they wanted to know if they knew where they were. And they told them that Lacey doesn't come around, every couple, they might not hear from her for a while. And so they labeled her a drifter at that point, which she wasn't a drifter either.
Right. In fact, that is in her Too Many Places that's noted. That Lacey Buenfil was a drifter, didn't have a house or anything. She had a house. Yeah. She had a trailer.
She had a home. She sure did. She had a house. Yep. That her grandparents bought for her. She wasn't a drifter. She just didn't talk to her grandparents when she wasn't doing correct. She didn't want to hear anything from them. But now my son and her 3 grandchildren, she contacted every single night. No matter what she was doing, she called the kids to tell them that she loved them and not forget to say their prayers every night.
Okay. But she didn't do that on the night of the 27th, did she?
No, she did not. Okay. And that's when my son knew something was wrong.
So something was up. All right, so they did say something about Lacey, but it wasn't that she disappeared the night before with Terry in the Ocala Forest. They told the police that she was just some drifter who would just come by once in a while. Just a totally
a meth user and a drifter.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Totally misled the police. Totally
lied. And the media. Yes.
Yeah, because right. That's right. And once again, for anybody who hasn't heard of this case before, if you go look at it, you're going to find these things that these people said about how Lacey was a drifter and everything else. Now, she might have been using meth, but she certainly wasn't a drifter. She had a car, she had a job, etc. She wasn't a drifter. That just came in and out of town. And
when you look at her pictures, you can tell that she was clean. She didn't have any of the sores that the people get from doing meth. She was beautiful,
Yeah, she was. Yes. Okay, so let's move on. All right, so once again, from your research and everything else, obviously, as the listeners could tell, you've done a lot. What goes on over the next few days? What happens to her car officially?
Okay. They actually let the car go be towed or drove. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know how it got back to the grandparents' house, but they let them take the car back to their house. And, I had told you, Ed, that the car had not been gone through. But I have heard since then that they did process the car. I was told in the beginning that they haven't processed the car. They told the grandparents not to do anything with the car in case they needed anything. And then the grandparents, thinking that Lacey is just out gallivanting around, they had the car detailed for Lacey so that when, because they didn't know,
Yeah. Right.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have these people that misled the police. The car gets towed away. The grandparents get it. Maybe it was processed. Maybe that's what you found out. And then, unfortunately, the worst thing that probably could happen is the car got cleaned.
Exactly.
Maybe, although
Exactly.
I don't know if anything happened in that car or not, but probably it should have maybe been left the way it was. When did you find out that Lacey was missing? How did you find out? Where were you? What was going on?
I'm a catastrophe insurance adjuster, so I'm in Ohio working a hailstorm, and my son called me panicking, saying that Lacey's missing. And I told him, I said, Corey, she'll be back. It's fine. And he said, no, it's not, Mom. They found her purse and they found her keys, and Lacey is missing. And so at that point in time, I knew what I had to do. I needed to come home. So I packed up my stuff. I left my deployment and I came back home.
And what day would this
to
have
be
been?
with him. Let me think. I probably got back here right around the 1st of January because we started having search efforts at that point when I got back, and that was the 1st of January. In fact, on my way home, I called my friends and my family, and they started setting up a search effort. So where we got a date of our first search, and we invited everybody to come, and whenever I got home is when we started working, and we've never stopped.
Okay. So you get back. At this point, we have to remind the listeners, all these names that you've dished out, in the first 45 minutes of the interview, you had no idea about any of these people when he called you to say that what Lacey was missing. And okay.
No.
Okay. So these searches were done, were they done out in the area of Ocala National Forest?
Yes. We went door to door. We went we talked to people that knew people, and we just started gathering information. We had over 100 people at our searches, and then they started dwindling down. Every weekend they got smaller and they got smaller. Now we never ever had a search with any sheriff's office. Okay, this was all done by the family and friends. We called the sheriffs to ask them if they could have somebody there at our command center just to show backup. And they only did that one year. They only did that one time. And that was like the third search effort that we had when we found Lacey's wallet.
Okay, and I want to talk about that. Was by the time that you got back, let's just say January 1st, 2012, had a missing persons report been filed at that time yet?
Yes.
Who filed it?
I think the grandparents did that.
Grandparents did that. Okay.
But I'm not for sure, but I do believe it was the grandparents.
Okay. So you get
she
back.
Was already known to be missing.
Right. All right. So you get back. These searches start getting organized. When do you, and we have to point this out because we stated that your son is not considered to be a suspect in Lacey's disappearance. And in fact, it wasn't until 13 days after her disappearance that he was even questioned.
No, Ed, he wasn't questioned. Okay.
Period.
I called.
Period.
I called the sheriff,
Mm-hmm.
and I told them I need somebody to be at my house. I'm coming in from Ohio, and now this was 13 days later. Okay. But I need to talk to somebody, and so they had 2 detectives come to my house. Me and my son were sitting there talking to them, and I asked them why they've dropped the ball in this case. And they told me they tried to assure me that they have not dropped the ball. And I looked at both of them and I pointed to my son. I said, it's been 13 days since she was reported missing, and y'all haven't spoke to him not one time. He has all 3 of their children. Shouldn't he have been a person of interest in her case? So don't tell me you haven't dropped the ball, because you have, because you've never spoke to him. And still to this day, almost 7 years later, my son was never questioned.
Somebody never went to his place of work, never went to his house, never invited to come down to the police station. Let's talk about Lacey.
Nope. The only thing we ever did was we called meetings with them. That's how I know they dropped the ball.
Okay.
Because, I mean, I don't know much, but I know that if he's got all 3 of their children, that he should have been a person of interest.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But, and so we started beating the bushes and gathering up all this information, and everything we gathered up, we emailed to the police. So everything that I've ever gathered, they have.
Okay.
Because they weren't doing it.
All right. Let me ask you a couple questions here. When did you first hear what we're going to continue to call the official story about Lacey going in this pickup truck with Terry? When did you first hear that story?
Okay. Let me see here. That would have been, I'm going to say, you're talking about when they went to Railroad Grade Road?
The day that she disappeared, when did you firstly hear the theory that she disappeared after she walked off into the forest after Terry got stuck? When did you hear that?
That would have been the 1st of January.
Okay, so right when you got back to Florida from Ohio.
Yep.
Did your son tell you that story? Did the grandparents tell you that story?
No. The grandparents had told us that they had came and talked to them. And once we got home, now one of the detectives did tell us that Terry said that they had gone to the woods to do drugs. That's when they found the video surveillance. That's whenever all of it came out of why they were there and where they were going, because they asked Terry where him and Lacey were going when they left the store.
Okay, so we're gonna have to. This is gonna get, once again, I'm trying to keep this straight. So, though Terry called a couple days beforehand to say that was her car, but then later he's admitting that he was with her the day that she disappeared.
Yep.
All right,
and now the sheriff did go and talk to him a lot.
Mm-hmm.
They went down his driveway a lot.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So at some point, I guess Terry had to change his story a little bit about her being a drifter and how she'd be back. He eventually had to say, it's not a story that we believe, but that he was out there and then she walked away.
Exactly.
All right. So so within like a week of her disappearing, he changed his story from her being a drifter and she was out of town and she'd eventually come back to, I was with her. She walked off into the woods. She hasn't been seen again.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
And he changed his story 2 or 3 times. 2 or 3 different stories he gave them.
It does sound like it. Okay. All right. So, and then once you started getting into all of this, you started hearing about Terry McDowell and Skeeter, and just over the course of the last 7 years, you've heard all these stories and all of these people's names, and that's how you've accumulated all this information. But when you got called in Ohio at the end of 2011, you'd never heard of any of these people before.
No, not one of them. Never heard of none of them.
And then once you started getting into this is when all these names started to pop up. And your son had never heard any of these names before. I'm going to guess because Lacey was keeping these people away from him, and especially her kids, probably.
Exactly. And that's why she let Corey take the girls. Corey had the girls. He had the girls at the time that she went missing.
He had so-called custody of them. You could say.
Well, not real. Yeah, kind of, because the cops told him that he could go get them.
Yeah.
If he felt like that things weren't good, you know.
Okay.
So he went and got them, and she just let him have them.
Okay. When you had first heard the story that Lacey was out in this truck with Terry and that she walked off and that she disappeared, did you believe that story when you first heard it? Just be honest. Did you or didn't you?
No. Lacey would have never walked off. Lacey would have never walked off, and Terry would have never taken us to where he put her.
Okay.
If he did anything with her.
Okay. All right.
She is too scared.
Okay, we're going to get into the rest of this now because there's still a lot to cover. We're going to get into the more specifics of this, and I want the listeners to understand there are a lot of rumors in this case. There's a lot of information, mainly because of Cindy doing all the work that she's been doing that I've already explained with the charts that she has in the notebooks and everything else. And she's followed a lot of different leads, probably a lot of it probably just rumors and theories and maybe some lies out there, but you've tried to follow all of it. You know, you've really been all over Central Florida trying to figure out what happened. Okay. First of all, let's talk about Skeeter. We already talked about him. Did you ever have a chance to talk to him at any point? Did he ever offer? He already changed his relationship status. Did you talk to him? Did he offer up any sadness as far as Lacey disappearing?
No, I never talked to Skeeter until about a year ago, and I Facebook messaged him when he was in a halfway house coming out of prison. I Facebook messaged him and got down on my knees pretty much, you know, and was begging him for information, and he did message me back and told me he knows nothing. Of course, he knew nothing.
Okay.
That's the only time I talked to him.
Okay. All right. We know that the car was given back to the grandparents. Maybe it was searched. Maybe it was documented. Anything that was in it. I'm not sure. As you already said, the purse allegedly was in Terry's truck, all dumped out. But then when they found the car, her purse was in her own car, but was empty. Her phone, was it ever found?
No, not that I know of. The phone was never found. But again, if the police have found it, they wouldn't share that with me anyway.
Okay. Well, I'm inclined to believe that if they did find it, they would tell you. Now, getting back, though, to Clarence for a second, is that Lacey did have a wallet that was found somewhere. Where was it found?
In our search efforts, somebody knocked on the door, and there was a girl that had been cleaning a house for somebody. Skeeter, Clarence Chastain's little camper or trailer, she was cleaning it, and she found Lacey's billfold in a file cabinet at his house. Now, he claimed that had been there for months, but pictures that the children have drawn and colored for Lacey, Christmas pictures, were in that wallet, and their Medicaid cards were in that wallet. So it hadn't been months since it had been there. It got there after Lacey went missing.
Right, because once again, Christmas was just a few days before that.
That's right. That's right. And they do have that wallet in evidence.
Okay.
With the pictures.
Okay, so to your knowledge, has Skeeter ever offered any explanation? I know you haven't talked to him. You only talked to him once, but getting through the grapevine or anything, has he ever offered any explanation of him having a wallet that he said was a few months old, but that obviously he had just a very short time?
Yeah, no, I never knew anything. I do know that the police talked to him about the wallet, and that's the reason that I knew that he said 2 to 3 months it had been there for several months.
Okay, so it seems interesting to me that her purse is found one place and her wallet's found somewhere else. I wonder how those two got separated. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, as far as the investigation, probably something that didn't help this whole thing is, did you tell me that the first detective on the case died?
Right. The very first detective that had been assigned the case had a heart attack and died right after he was assigned Lacey's case.
Okay. So that couldn't have helped. And then, as you kind of alluded to, but I want to talk about it a little deeper now, that, you know, the tough part about this case, even though it's in Florida, it's right in the smack in the middle of Florida, is that you still had a jurisdictional issue with this, in that Terry, where he lives and everything, and where her car was found, is in one county, but where he says the disappearance happened in the South Ocala National Forest is in a different county. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's
Okay.
correct.
All right. Now tell the listeners about the issue between Lake County and Marion County? Lake and Marion?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
They like played hot potato with this case, didn't they?
They did. Yep. Because Lake County are the ones that was assigned the case, because that's where Terry said they were. Okay, after Lake County assigned a detective to the case, another detective, and he worked the case for, I'm going to say, a year, at least probably a year, gathered up 2,000 pages of information that we and they gathered up, okay? We had a meeting that we called with the sheriff's office, and the sheriff's office told us that they have 2,000 pages. They showed us the reports, the pages, 2,000 pages that they are handing over to Marion County, because they believe that Lacey died in Marion County, and they believe Lacey was inhumanely disposed of in Marion County. So they are giving the case to Marion County.
And Marion County is where Terry lived. It's not and Lake County is where the Ocala National Forest is.
That's correct. That's correct. Yep.
Okay. So what the police are saying is that Lacey actually disappeared at least near where Terry lived, and not where he said the disappearance happened.
That's right. That's right. That's what they're saying that they believe happened. So they gave the case to Marion County. So then we called a meeting with Marion County. Mm-hmm. We go and sit down with the sheriff, the major of the crimes unit, a detective there, and probably 4 or 5 different law enforcement. And they told me, I told them what Lake County had told me, and they told me, we do not own Lacey's case. We are an assisting agency is it. We are assisting them in their search efforts. We don't own this case. And I told them that that's what they told me, that they had given them the case. They said, no, ma'am, we do not own this case. We are assisting them. And I said, well, they told me that it's now a cold case in Lake County. Now, this was years ago, Ed.
I know.
That it was a cold case. Okay. Now, about 3 months ago, Lake County tells me that I'm sorry, let me back up. Probably 6 months ago, they wanted to take the case back over, because they feel like, because of the last place she was seen was Altoona on that store video, that they should be working the case. So they picked the case back up this last year.
Marion County.
No, Lake County.
Lake County, okay.
After giving it to Marion County. Now, Lake County told me that it was a cold case, that they were giving it to Marion County, okay? Well, now, 3 months ago, they told me that they're going to make it a cold case because they have more resources available if it's a cold case. So they didn't make it a cold case years ago. They just are making it a cold case right now.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like they were stomping. They were afraid that they were going to step on each other's toes. Marion County didn't want to do anything. Lake County didn't want. Nobody wanted to do anything, and that's why we stepped up and we did as much as we could do, putting ourselves definitely in harm's way. May I add that now I'm so scared now that I won't even have a candlelight vigil for her that I was having every year, because I'm scared to go down there and do it.
Mm-hmm. Just so the listeners can understand this. So Lake County now, as of October 22nd, 2018, is the investigating agency for Lacey's disappearance.
Yep, that's what they say.
Okay, and Lake County is the area in which is where Terry lives, or is that where Ocala National Forest is?
Okay. Terry lives in Marion County. Okay.
I know. Yes.
The only thing about Lake County was where they were at the store and where he said they were at Railroad Grade Road. That is the only thing happened in Lake County.
Okay, so and that's the reason that Lake County is now in charge of this investigation, because of the video and because of where he says his truck broke down.
Yep. And what they did this last year, they assigned a detective to Lacey's case in Lake County, and that's the only thing he was doing was Lacey's case. No other cases, no other workload, just Lacey's case for the last year. Now they've taken him off the case, and they're making it a cold case because he didn't get anywhere. Because you hand a detective 2,000 pages back, plus we'll all get Marion County gathered, and they can't get a handle on any of it because they haven't been there the whole time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, okay, thank you for that. So this has been a jurisdictional issue for a while now, and it's now considered officially a cold case, even though you were misled years ago about that. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Is there any proof that the story that Terry told about her walking off to the woods is true? And I asked that, and then I ask you, there's a story you told me about a fire that was made out in the woods near his truck, and one of the papers in it was to Ian from Hunter. Can you explain all that?
Yes, when we went to Railroad Grade Road to search, which was right after we found out they had been there, we went down to Railroad Grade Road to search, and as we're walking in to Railroad Grade Road, on the left side of the road was a little makeshift fire with ashes and stuff. Mm-hmm. Well, when we got down and was kind of digging through the fire, just looking at anything that looked different, when we looked down, we saw some Christmas paper that had been crumbled up and it had been burnt a little bit. So we took the Christmas paper and opened it up, and it said to Ian from Hunter. So it was a gift wrap to Ian from Hunter. Mm-hmm. Well, Ian and Hunter are Brandy's children. The Brandy that we talked about in the very beginning. Yes. Okay? So I knew Brandy had been there because that's what they were making the fire with. So that's why we talked to Brandy and found out, yes, that she had gone out to get Terry because he had called her and her friend and the two guys went out to get him.
Yeah, she was with the two guys and went out to get him, right? And they were the ones that gave him Terry back a ride to town. And it was somebody else who actually towed the car, and to revisit that for a moment. Okay, so it's very interesting that you came upon that. What luck that you came upon that.
I know.
Okay. All right, now I'm going to pause here for a moment to tell the listeners that, as you already know, it's a little complicated. Seems like a simple case. Woman walks off into the woods, she disappears, and it's not like that. So not much we can do about that. But the other thing is, even though Unfound is a PG show, there may be some things we're going to talk about here very shortly that are not PG-like, and I don't want to have to put you into a situation as a parent having to explain some of the things to your kids. All right, so I'm just going to warn you about that now, because now we're going to talk about Terry and his friends. Simply put, did Terry and some of those men that we mentioned earlier, and maybe some that you don't even know about, did they rape Lacey?
I was told that 5 of them raped her. Okay. I was not told who it was or what their names were. I just knew that they had videoed it. And the sheriff in Lake County told me they do have a sex video in evidence. So I guess some of the information that we do get is true. And that's the thing. In the very beginning, I had a former sheriff tell me that no matter what all you gather up, no matter how big a story can get and how many lies people can tell, usually there's a little bit of truth in every story, So, yeah.
All right, so this videotape allegedly exists, and it's allegedly in the possession of, let's just pick a county, Lake County.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. That's
all right. I have to ask, have you ever personally seen this videotape?
No, I have not.
Okay. Do you know of anybody in the public who has seen this videotape?
I know that Terry McDowell did because he showed it to Lacey. He was one.
Well, I don't mean it that way.
Okay.
I mean after the disappearance, after she disappeared, has anybody ever seen this tape?
No.
Okay.
None of us.
Do you know how long the police have had this tape? Since virtually the beginning, or is this something that popped up later?
No, I think that it was pretty soon. I would say probably within the first year.
Okay.
I don't know, really. I don't know how long they've had it.
Okay. And you already mentioned that you believe that Terry might have shown this tape to Lacey after this rape happened, and to remind everybody that she was allegedly drugged up when this happened, maybe unconscious when this was going on.
Yes.
How do you know? We don't know, but we think you've been told. How do you know that Terry showed this tape to Lacey?
I was told that he had showed it to her because he was wanting to have a threesome with her and Michelle. Now remember, Michelle beat her up. Okay.
Yes.
He's wanting to have a threesome with them, and Lacey is like, no. I mean, that wasn't her demeanor at all. Mm-hmm. Her character was not that. And so he showed her the video. And when he did, she panicked. And now this is what he said. Let me see here.
Do you have any idea who the men are in this video?
I don't.
You've never heard any rumors?
No.
You don't know if it was like Skeeter or it was Josh Jenkins or DJ Jenkins or any of these guys that we've named, Chris Thornton?
Randy Evans. I don't know. I do know that there was a guy, and I cannot remember his name right now. I've got it in some of my notebooks, but that he was into the dark porn websites. Mm-hmm. And they said that he was going to sell this video to the dark porn websites. And they also said that every time Lacey would kind of come to, that they would shoot her up with more drugs to where she wouldn't come to.
Okay. Oh my. Okay. Do you have any idea how the police even found out about this tape and how they got their hands on it? I mean, I would think that if the tape like that exists, that everybody and their mother would be trying to hide this thing so the police don't get it.
Yes, and you know, and I can say that I know they have a sex tape. I don't know when they got it, Ed, but I know they have it because this last year when I had my meeting with them, I've kind of gotten to where I can say things and they'll tell me stuff that they normally wouldn't. But it's like I already know they have it, you know. So I said something about the sex tape, and one of the main one of the main sheriffs, like he's not a captain, but he's on up there. He said yes. He said we do have the sex tape. So he told me that they do have the sex tape.
Okay.
I mean, he told me.
And here's the big deal, though. Has anybody, I mean, if this was a rape, and it looks like on the tape that Lacey is unconscious, doesn't know what's going on, has anybody ever been charged with rape in relation to this video?
No. Nope.
Have you ever gotten an explanation for that?
No.
Okay.
No, because I've never questioned them about that. It's just whenever this last year, whenever he told me that they do have the sex tape, I never went into it. What do you know, who was there or whatever. Anytime I ask them anything, they normally shun me off.
Okay.
You know, or they'll tell me, Miss Fox, you know, we can't tell you that.
Okay, because it would seem to me if you have a woman, I mean, especially of course, 2011 is kind of before the whole Me Too movement of the last couple years with women, you know, now coming out saying, yes, this man raped me or sexually harassed me years ago. We know that that's going on in the United States. And of course, video sometimes has played a huge part in some of these cases. I'm just a little surprised if you have a video and you have these men on there, unless they're wearing masks or something.
Right, that's what I've been thinking too.
Might be able to figure out who these guys are and bring them in for questioning and stuff. But maybe they did, but you just don't know about it. But I think you would.
But they would have arrested somebody for it, I would think.
Yeah,
you know? That's what I was wondering, if maybe they're not showing the guys. I couldn't figure out that myself.
Okay. So we just don't know about that, but the police insist that they have some sort of videotape in connection with Lacey in some form or fashion. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Now, to expound on that a little bit, this is not the first time that we believe maybe that friends of Terry's or Terry himself has drugged a woman up. In fact, you discovered that possibly Terry and his friends would drug their girlfriends up so they could go out and have a good time.
Yep. That's what we were told, that they would drug them up, and then that way they didn't have to answer to anything. They could go and play and do whatever they wanted to do.
Okay. And can you say who told you that?
Matt told me that.
Matt Maynard?
Matt Maynard.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, that's good that you brought him up because we're going to talk about that right now. Matt Maynard, if the listeners will remember quite a while ago when we talked about how his ex-wife, who was in jail, she gets out, she goes over to his house. Her name is Misty. She starts looking around because she had heard something about a camera, an SD card. She finds the SD card. And when does she find it, and what is on it?
Okay, she found it after she got out of prison, which wasn't long. I'm going to say probably a couple, 3 or 4 months after Lacey went missing. And it might have even been within that first year. Let me say that. She found this SD card in the house, like I said, in the book, after she went to looking for it.
Okay.
She did turn that SD card into the sheriff's office.
Okay. And what was on it?
Okay, on the SD card, she's only told me about 2 pictures, okay? And I don't know if that's all she saw or all she wanted to see by the time she turned it in. One of the pictures was Lacey on her knees with the bra and panties on, her hands tied behind her back, and a girl named Shayna Kelly with a .38 in Lacey's mouth. Now, if Misty knew that it was Shayna Kelly with the gun in her mouth, I don't understand why she hasn't been arrested either.
Mm-hmm.
You know, unless maybe Misty just knew it was her by some reason. I don't know. But she said Shayna had a gun in her mouth. The other picture is a picture of what looks like to be a camper and a blue tarp up underneath the camper step, and sticking out from the camper is 2 boots, and the tarp looked like it went down into the boots. And it more or less looked like it could have been somebody wrapped up in a tarp and put up under this camper.
Do you have any idea
And
whose camper?
whose
you saw that picture?
I saw that picture. Now, I talked to a guy that is a manager of Advanced Auto Parts, and he said that it looks like that is a camper step. He looked at the battery. He looked at all of this. But the girl that had the SD card, Misty thinks that is a truck, a big dump truck, like for a tree service company would use, the big dump trucks. She thinks that's what it is. Well, and that makes more sense because DJ and Josh and all these guys work for a tree service. So it could have been a dump truck and not a camper.
Okay. All right. So we have a picture with Lacey, who is recognizable, I guess, in it. No doubt that it is she. Bound, has a gun in her mouth. But there's just women, it sounds like, in this picture, in contrast to this rape that allegedly happened that's on video. These seems to be 2 different situations, possibly. You know, one involving some women taking advantage of Lacey, and then another situation where men are taking advantage of Lacey. And once again, this was Matt Maynard on Matt Maynard's camera, but it's not alleged that he's the one that took the pictures. That camera was borrowed by Jennifer Thompson.
That's correct.
And then she brought the camera back, had the SD card, and for some reason he had that SD card and never turned it into the police for some reason, which, you know.
Right.
So I don't know what to make of that. And it was his ex-wife, Misty, who coincidentally you just ran into recently, and we'll just leave it at that, who finally turned it into the police. She did the right thing.
Right.
Okay, so there were some things going on in Lacey's background having to do with sex and S&M that doesn't sound like she was a willing party to. It sounds like. Okay?
Right.
Okay, so we got this video, we got this picture that was found, these pictures that were found. Okay. We've mentioned a lot of women, once again, Jennifer Thompson, Venus, AJ, etc. After the rape in the photos, there was a rumor once again that we had this fight between Lacey and this woman who stole the bounce house. But you also heard about a rumor that Lacey was beat up by a bunch of women at a party.
Yes.
On December 27th, 2011.
Yep, and that would have been Terry McDowell's sister, which was also Randy Evans' girlfriend at the time.
Okay. What have you heard about? What have you heard about this? And where did it happen? In fact, you and I were allegedly where it happened when I went up and saw you about a month and a half ago. Whose place was it? Explain that and how you found out about it.
Okay, that was the Norris, Norris, Norris property is where this apparently happened. They, I was told that they had beat Lacey up real bad, the girls, and that Tiffany, Terry's sister, had walked Lacey off of the property, helped her get off of the property. She called her brother at like 2:30 in the morning, Terry, and told Terry that Lacey was fixing to die, that he needed to come get her. And allegedly, Terry came and picked Lacey up and took her to Waterman Hospital, which I believe is in Eustis. And when he got her to Waterman Hospital, he checked her pulse and she was dead.
And I guess what I want to say about this would contradict the story of him and Lacey going out to the woods and doing dope and then her walking off. This story certainly contradicts that.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Please continue.
So yes. So he takes her to the hospital, finds out that she is not breathing. She has no pulse. So he takes her back out to the woods. Now this is, like you said, contradictory to what we had been told originally. This story that I'm telling you now, I just heard this story this last year.
Okay.
From Matt Maynard. It's the first time I had spoke to him. Matt told me that he took her to the Causeway, which is by Skeeter's house.
Matt didn't do it. Terry did. Not Matt.
Terry.
Terry did.
That's right. Terry. Yep. Terry took her to the Causeway, put her in the Causeway, which is a real soft, marshy type land. And he told me that he ran over her to put her down into the marsh to where nobody could see her until they could dispose of her properly. Okay, that's what I was told by Matt.
Okay.
That's what Terry did with her until they could dispose of her.
Okay. Okay, so all right, it's a pretty sad and horrific story if that is true. The key on this though is the reason that these women might have beaten Lacey up at this party, and this would have been later in the day from when she and Terry were seen on video, could have been because of the rape that Lacey had happened to her. Is that possible?
Yeah. Yep. Because Tiffany was jealous of Randy. Mm-hmm. And maybe Randy was involved. I don't know.
Okay, so the way that would work for the listeners would be that here she is, she's drugged up, and these guys do it for the purpose of raping Lacey, and then the women find out that this happened, and instead of being mad at their men, they're actually mad at Lacey for having sex with their men.
Yes. And she didn't even know what was going on.
I believe that. I do believe that. Okay, so that's why if we're looking for a reason that this might have happened, that these women, not men, but actually women, beat up Lacey, maybe to within an inch of her life, and maybe she did end up dying because of this. It could have been because of this. And not to mention that it seems that there was already some animosity toward Lacey, being that she'd just been ripped off the day before. There were some women in this group, this huge gang of, people doing meth that didn't like Lacey in the first place. So maybe the video and her being seen with all these guys was just a way, like, push them over the edge that we have to take care of this girl.
Yeah.
Possibly. Okay. And once again,
maybe they beat her up and they didn't even mean to beat her up that bad. Who knows?
Well, we just don't know. But when, a group of people, gang up on one, I think that the possibilities of somebody getting some fatal wounds is probably going to be pretty possible. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'll remind the listeners, you and I were on that property about 6 weeks ago, the Norris property, and was this a party? Do you even know how many people could have been at this party? Do you even know who was at this party? Because the trailer where this all happened isn't on the property anymore; it's gone.
That's correct. It got destroyed. It got totally disassembled and taken away.
Okay. All right, because then I got to tell you, that's you and I were out there, and it was pretty shady area. I mean,
very shady.
Very, very shady. And just to give the listeners an idea of the kind of shady area, you and I were at that bar called the Crazy Eights bar that we sat in there for a little while. And I had said something to you like, well, what's back down this road? Do we need to go back down this road? And you said to me, unless you just want to see houses with no doors and windows on them and people shooting up in their front yards, there's really no reason to go back there. That's what you told me.
Right.
Is that true? That's true.
Right. That's true. Yes, sir. Yes.
So
we saw it.
Yeah.
Firsthand, we saw it.
Yeah. So this is the kind of area for the listeners that we are talking about. That was right down the street, maybe a quarter mile, if maybe just a couple 100 feet from where Lacey allegedly was at this party with other people, and that she got beat up, and maybe something happened there instead of her walking off into the forest, and getting lost. And it should be noted, where this Norris property is and where she allegedly disappeared in the forest, they're not anywhere near each other. Nowhere near each other.
Nope.
Okay. Let's move on to this. We mentioned Chris Thornton before. Now, he's had some interesting things to say about all of this. Yep. And to remind the listeners, he was kind of Terry McDowell's gopher, kind of his, assistant or butler. If Terry wanted something done, Chris was more than happy to do it. When did you first hear about him, and what are the two main stories that he told you personally?
I, again, was working. So my sister and my best friend went to jail and talked to Chris. After Chris had his girlfriend contact me, because the sheriffs weren't listening to him, my sister and my friend Shannon went to talk to Chris. Chris told them that, let me back up just for a second. The sheriff's office told me about the second year in, we now have a credible witness in Lacey's case. And I said, a credible witness, I said, would that be Chris Thornton? Because they told me that Chris had passed 3 lie detector tests. And they said yes. So they counted him as a credible witness, But now what he said then and what he's saying now is the two different stories, He said that DJ...
Chris said, we can't use pronouns here. Chris said...
I'm sorry.
Okay, that's all right. Chris said
that DJ Jenkins mixed up a gram of meth, a Roxycontin and an Oxycontin in a syringe, and Michelle is the one that shot Lacey up with what they called the kill shot in the right breast because she was dehydrated and they couldn't get a vein in her arm. He said Lacey's last words were, "Oh God, that burns," as she pulled away from them doing what they were doing. He also said that before they shot her up, that she was very drugged up. like she wasn't, she was conscious, but she wasn't real conscious. She then fell on the floor and started having convulsions, and Terry McDowell ordered Chris to shoot her in the head with a .38 pistol. And like I said earlier, Josh bought a .38 from Chris Thornton for $150 on 12/27 of 2011. Terry McDowell told Chris to shoot Lacey, and he couldn't do it. He said he ran out of the camper, and he heard 2 shots. And then he heard Terry and DJ arguing in the camper. Then the door opened, and Terry told Chris to go to the barn and get a tarp. He went and got a tarp. He said they wrapped her up in this tarp, and that DJ threw her over his shoulder like she was a dead dog, like she was household trash, and threw her in the back of Terry's truck. They cut the fence through Sunny Hill Restoration by Terry's property, and they went through the fence. Chris was on a 4-wheeler with Josie, the girl named Josie, and DJ and Terry were in the truck. DJ put her on his shoulder again and went down to the river, where he slipped and got wet in the river and was very mad because he got wet. And he disposed of her there, is what we were told by Chris in the beginning.
Okay. Did they give any reason that they would give? Did Chris give any reason why they would give Lacey such harmful? Were they trying to kill her? Were they trying to kill her?
Yes. And the reason that I was told that they were trying to kill her is because Lacey had confided in a girl that she had met out there that she thought was her friend. Lacey had confided in this girl that they had raped her, that the 5 guys had raped her. She saw it on video, and she was reporting it to the police. And this girl went and told, apparently, DJ and Terry that Lacey was going to report it to the police.
Okay. So we're starting to get closer and closer to maybe a motive in all of this, that Lacey maybe was made to disappear, possibly. Yeah. The unfortunate part, though, is that Chris also told a totally different story. Why don't you give them that story, too?
Okay, and now this story I heard just this year, okay, that he got a call from Randy Evans that Terry wanted him to kill Lacey, that they would give him $4,000 and $4,000 worth of dope if he would do it. And he said that Terry called him to go pick up Lacey because Lacey had walked off from Railroad Grade Road. And he was told to go pick up Lacey. And when Chris found Lacey, he tried to get her to get into the truck with him, and Lacey didn't want to. And he told her, I'm just going to take you to your car. So she got into the truck with him, and they started traveling to go take Lacey to her car. And then he got a phone call. And he said the phone call was for him to run somebody some dope, and said that when he got the phone call, he told Lacey he had to make a stop, and Lacey got scared and tried to get out of the truck. Now, we were told back in the beginning of 2012, that there was a hunter that was hunting, and he did see a girl try to get out of somebody's truck going down Highway 19. So that could have been Lacey trying to get, if this is true, trying to get out of this truck. And then Chris pulls her back in, and when he does, Lacey starts hitting him in the face. She's franticking, trying to get away from him. And he said that when he pulled her to him, he had grabbed her neck, and when he pulled her to him, that she went limp. So he had said that he had broke her neck. And then he got scared, and he stopped, and he put her in the bushes on the side of the road until he could go get help. And then he went back and he got Terry, and then they supposedly disposed of her. Now, that was his second story.
So those stories couldn't be more different.
Right. But now listen, what he did, he told the detectives both of these stories too. Because the second one, The second one I just told y'all, Chris said that they disposed of her in the river, but not by Terry's house. At first, when he took the detectives to Sunny Hill, when Chris took the detectives to Sunny Hill Restoration, where they disposed of her originally, where DJ had her on his shoulder, when the detectives got there, they said they've had everybody look at this video of Chris, and he was truly, truly shocked that she wasn't there. So they believe that, okay? But now, but see, the detectives have never told me anything like this.
Right.
This is the first time they've ever been open about what he said. But he said that they went to the river, the bridge, and they actually would count the cars and how long it would take a car to get to where they were, to where they knew when to dump the body. Okay? But now, this was at the bridge in Astor, I believe, here in Central Florida, and they did go there within the last 6 months, and they dredged that river to try to find her. So they have looked in 3 bodies of water, I'm going to say, this past year.
So at some level, the police kind of believe Chris. Even though he has told 2 totally separate stories, it seems like they're trying to follow up on some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
And you personally have had an opportunity to talk to Chris?
I have not. My sister Ann Shannon did, but I have not.
Okay.
But I want to, and I think I'm fixing to. He's still in prison, so I'm thinking about getting a pass to go see him.
Okay. Now, EquiSearch, did they get involved in trying to find Lacey? How did that all happen?
Yes. EquiSearch got involved. I talked to Tim, who is the founder of EquiSearch, and he assured me that they were coming and that they would never leave, that they would stay, and that they would help us until we brought her home. They came one time, and the forest is so big.
It is.
And I'm assuming that's why they only came one time, because that was it. But because they were coming, it was all over the news that EquiSearch was coming, and that's why we think that they moved her body away from Terry's house, is because EquiSearch was coming.
And did EquiSearch search near Terry's house?
They searched some of the area at Sunny Hill, in the Sunny Hill Restoration area. They did search there. But now, before Texas EquiSearch got here, about the 3rd or 4th week after Lacey went missing, they told us during our search efforts that we need to be now, at this point in time, looking for buzzards. When you see buzzards, you know. So when we got back from one of our searches one weekend, there was a lot of buzzards flying across the street from where our command center was. Across the street is where Sunny Hill Restoration is and where Terry McDowell lives, okay? And so we were going to go over and look because of the buzzards. And that somebody told us that they saw a deer leg over there. So we never went. But I know it in my heart that that was probably her, because that's before Texas EquiSearch came.
Okay. All right. Okay. So we have all these different people. Chris Thornton. We have the women. We have Skeeter. But it all comes back to Terry McDowell. He was he interviewed by police regarding all of this? Was he ever taken a lie detector test? Was he ever, in your mind, was he ever a suspect at all?
Yeah. Now, I don't know if they ever gave him, if he agreed to a lie detector test. I do know that they went down his driveway to talk to him very, very regularly. Like once every 2 weeks, they went down in there to talk to him.
Okay. All right. And just to touch on something again, allegedly, if this putting Lacey in a bag and then him running over with her truck just to push her down into the ground, into the marsh, so she wouldn't be seen, And then the belief is then, if this actually happened, once again, if we want to go down this rabbit hole, that then they went back and moved her somewhere else. That's a belief.
Right.
Right. And maybe moved her before EquiSearch got there or something like that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Has any of the I mean, we've named, 12 different people in this, at least, both men and women, regarding this case.
Yeah.
How would you say, have any of them ever been given lie detector tests? Have they ever been subjected to an official interrogation? What, to your knowledge, about any of these people?
I don't know. I do know that Chris Thornton had the lie detector test, 3 of them done. I do know that he's the one that was trying to tell them what happened, and they wouldn't listen to him. That's why he did the lie detector test. I don't know about anybody else ever doing a lie detector test or not.
Okay. Now, your personal opinion, of course, I have to remind the listeners again, when you first started in this in the beginning of 2012, you had no idea who any of these people were. And little by little, you hear about this name, then that name, and you start accumulating these notebooks that you have. You start, going to these places. You have this chart that just a huge amount, encyclopedia of information. And because of that, though, your opinion has changed over time as to what you think happened. And it's tough to tell because there's all these different things that go in different directions. Obviously, a lot of these stories are not true. We just don't know which ones. But your opinion has changed, hasn't it?
Yeah, but I still feel like, Ed, and the reason I feel like this is Chris Thornton, in the beginning, when he said what he did, and he wanted me to contact the media because they weren't listening. That story, the one about them being in the camper and them shooting Lacey up with a kill shot, I have believed that this whole time. That's what happened.
Okay.
For almost 7 years, that's what I believed. This year is when I heard about him breaking her neck. And I said, that would make me feel so much better just knowing that he snapped her neck and she didn't have to suffer getting beat up so bad, and everything else that I heard. So I just don't know. I don't know. Yeah. It's all hearsay, really. It's what people told me.
Right. And then with all this information, we need to add this before we'll get to the where are they now part. You actually did a presentation to the police with all of this information that you have, didn't you?
Yes. Yeah.
When was that, and how'd that go?
This last year, whenever we had the new detective assigned to the case, and this was the only case he was working, and again, I want to back up, okay? I didn't do it. A friend of mine contacted the governor in the beginning of Lacey's case because of them dropping the ball. And the sheriff's office, Lake County, called me, wanted to have an emergency family meeting because they got a disturbing phone call from the governor. So we went and we had an emergency meeting, and they told me they don't like getting disturbing calls from the governor. And I told them if they were in my shoes, I feel like that they would probably have done the same thing, that we're doing everything that we can do to possibly bring her home. And she assured me, Sergeant Kristen Thompson assured me that we would start having regular family meetings, monthly meetings, to keep us posted. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So I think 2 years went by, and I called a meeting. And I went up there with a new administration, and I told them exactly what she told me with her sitting there. And how many times have I been called to have a family meeting? 0. Not one time, unless I've called it. So every meeting we've ever had, I've called. So this last one that we had, when I found out that we had a new detective, it's a new administration again, okay? So I go in there and I lay out my timeline, and when they get up and they all start reading my timeline, they all start reading everything on it, now they want pictures of my timeline to where they can have it with them. They took pictures of it, and now they've got it on a long piece of paper rolled up. The detective keeps it in his car all the time, okay? But plus, along with all the other emails that we sent them, they didn't gather this information. And one thing, they told me to keep doing what I'm doing because they talk to me where they won't talk to the police. which is probably true.
Yeah.
Which is probably true.
Absolutely
but
true.
you keep doing what you're doing. You keep beating those bushes and putting yourself in harm's way, you know. But I did, because they weren't.
Right. Yep, I've seen the notebooks. I mean, I haven't read every page, but you brought them to the get together we had about a month and a half ago, and the accumulation of information is impressive. It's just completely impressive, and I would hope that anybody in law enforcement would think the same way. I would hope.
Well, they told me that they felt like I was in the wrong line of work. So
maybe. Okay, so we've gone through these theories. We've talked about these people. We don't know which is true, and in fact, it may be that Lacey disappeared for some completely other reason that we just haven't heard about, that people are still keeping to themselves. But here's going to be the tough part, probably moving on in this case. Where is Terry McDowell now?
Terry McDowell died of a meth explosion. He was cooking some meth, and it blew up in his face, and he died 3 days later.
And how long ago was this? When did this happen?
Terry died on April 24th of 2013.
All right. So not even 2 years after Lacey disappeared.
Mm-mm.
All right. So anything he knew, he took to his grave.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And his girlfriend, what is her name and where is she?
Her name was AJ Alicia Boyer. Alicia died probably 6 months after Terry in a car wreck. Her and another fella.
Wow.
They died in a car wreck.
Okay. We haven't talked too much about this guy, but Terry's brother, what is his name? And you know, if he has anything to do with this, where is he?
Terry's brother, his name is Jerry, and Jerry and Terry lived on the same property in campers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe Jerry might have lived in a trailer. I'm not real sure. But Jerry died probably a year after AJ of an overdose.
Okay.
And then Denver Norris, where we thought that Lacey's body was disposed on, his property.
Yeah, the Denver Norris, let's just remind the listeners, Denver Norris is the property where this party might have gone down, where Lacey got beat up by those women. The property that you and I visited, Denver Norris. Yeah, please tell the listeners about him.
Yep, and he died of a heart attack.
Wow.
So there's five people. There's actually a sixth person, and by the life of me, I can't remember who it was, but somebody else has died also.
Did you not tell me that the guy who first introduced Lacey to Terry died? Remember the guy that she met in the...
Yeah, that's Charlie. Yep, that's Charlie Williams. Yep.
So he's dead too.
Yep. So they're all dead, but there's still a lot of people that were there or involved that know something, you know?
Yeah. Where you already said Chris Norton is in jail. What's he in jail for?
You know, I don't know what he's in jail for. I don't know what his charges are.
How long? You said that he was not in jail, of course, when Lacey disappeared, but then sometime between then and now, I guess he did something to get in trouble. I guess.
Yeah, he did something to get in trouble.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea when he's going to be getting out of jail?
I don't know his release date either. And I'm sure that we've got that somewhere because we always would print their mug sheet, you know, whenever they got arrested. So I've got it somewhere.
Okay. Matt Maynard, he's the guy who had the camera that ended up with the SD card. What's he doing now?
I met Matt this last year for the first time ever. And he gave me a lot of this information, new stuff that I never had. But he was supposed to meet with me again, and now it's like he's kind of disappeared. And I'll tell you, you know the bar that you were talking about a while ago?
Crazy Eights, where we met.
Yes,
Crazy Eights,
yes. That's right. So I was at Crazy Eights one day. I went there. We went there as a group because we were looking for Matt Maynard's new wife. Because they had split up and she had told somebody some information that her husband had told her. So I wanted to go talk to her. Well, I got down there and she was working, but she was getting off work. So I explained to her who I was, and she hugged me and she cried and she cried and she cried. And she said, "I'm fixing to be off work. If you can just give me a minute." And I said, "Sure." So we gave her a minute. She got off work. She came over and talked to me, and just told me the same thing that I had been told before. So it kind of, reiterated things to me or made things more clear. But then she told me that she had to be excused for a minute, and she went to the back, and then she comes back out and sits at the bar beside a guy. And the guy she's sitting beside is Matt Maynard, that I've been wanting to talk to for 6 years.
Wow.
So I get up, go to the bathroom. All of my girls come with me. I tell them that that's Matt Maynard sitting there with her. And so when we walk out of the bathroom, they're not sitting at the bar anymore. So I ran. Me and a friend of mine ran outside to stop them from leaving. And I noticed that their keys were on the bar. So I knew they were just outside. So we walked outside. And as we walked outside, they're walking in. And he tells his wife, "Is that her?" And I turn around and look, and when I do, he turns around to me, and I said, "Matt Maynard." And I walked up and I shook his hand. I told him, "I've been looking for you for 6 years." And he said, "Well, I'm right here." And I said, "Do you mind speaking with me?" And he said, "Not at all." So we walked out to the back of a truck, and we started talking right there by the road where we were. We started talking, and Randy Evans drove by. And when Randy Evans drove by, you could tell he was scared to death. Randy went down the road, he turned around, and when he turned around to come back, we all decided it was in our best interest to get in Crazy Eight's bar and not be out there for him to see us.
Wow.
And so Matt told me that he would meet me somewhere else the next day, and he did. He met with me, and then he was going to meet with me again, and I've never heard from him since.
And how long ago was
and
that?
That was probably 6 months ago.
Okay.
I've sent messages and everything, and nobody wants to talk anymore.
Okay. What is going on with all of in general, these women? Are all these women, Jennifer Thompson, Venus, Terry's sister, are they all still alive? Are they still around?
Yes, they're all still alive.
Okay. And is one of the rumors going back to when Lacey possibly got beat up at Denver Norris's place? Could have Terry's sister been one of the women who was beating Lacey up that night?
Yes, she could have been.
Okay.
He's the one that walked her off of the property.
Okay. All right. Let's just, we've covered so much material. Just a very complicated case, and it's always going to be that way when you have people who are on drugs and they're telling stories and things we just aren't sure what to believe. But is there anything that says Lacey disappeared in the Ocala Forest? Anything? Any proof at all?
No proof at all.
Nothing. The only thing that we have to go by is Terry McDowell's word.
That's right. And also is her being a meth user. That was his word, not anybody else's. That was his word.
Right. Okay.
But we knew she was sick when she showed up that night for Christmas. She was sick. But yeah, none of us ever knew of her to do any drugs or even drink, for that matter, except for the very end, whenever she ended up moving out of Corey's in her house, where she was drinking.
Okay, so we're just not sure about this, but you and I don't believe the published story, the popular story. Once again, that she was in a truck and walked off and everything. There's just too many other things going on in this case to even believe that is the case. We're just not sure what of these other rumors that we're supposed to believe. We talked about your son Corey at the beginning, and you just mentioned him. This still affects him to this day, doesn't it?
It's so sad. It's so sad. It does. It's just horrible. Him and Lacey, like I said in the very beginning, were soulmates. And no matter what they were going through at the time, they would have ended up getting back together. I do believe that in my heart. I know they would have, because of the way he feels about her and the way she felt about him. She was just trying to sow her oats, I guess you'd say. Yeah. But she had no idea what she was getting herself into, and that came with the naive part of her.
Mm-hmm. Right. And you had told me, if we can talk about this, it's not until very recently that her children were told about their mother.
Yes. Now, they've known since the beginning. In the very beginning, Lacey's grandparents told them that their mommy was sick and in a hospital far, far away. Well, you know, they were 1, 4, and 5 at the time. They were very young.
Mm-hmm.
So that next year, I pulled out my search bag with all of my flyers because the girls had saw a picture of their mommy in a store window.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just had a family meeting with the children, and we explained to them that their mommy is not sick and in a hospital, that Granny and Papa did not know what to tell them, and that's what they thought was best, and that their mommy's missing. And that's why that picture that they saw on the window was their mom. And that we're doing everything that we can do to find her, and that's what they were told back then. And the girls knew. Ruby said, "Well, I know that my mommy is in heaven," and she said, "Because if she wasn't in heaven, she would be here." So they've known for a long time that mommy's not coming back. They felt it in their hearts. You know what I mean, Ed?
Yeah,
they didn't know for a fact, but they felt it in their hearts because she would be here, because she always was. So now they sat down last week for the first time, and Corey told me, he said, "Mom, I really need to talk to Ruby," because Ruby's fixing to be 12. Oh, no, she is 12. She's fixing to be 13.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "You know, their whole life I've taught the children how to be honest, and that they should always be honest." He said, "And I've been living a lie about their mom. You know, I need them to know why I'm so protective over them, why I protect them, why I don't let them go to friends' houses, and why I don't want them to go here and go there without me." You know, it's like he feels like he has to be with them all the time. And so it worked out last Saturday that he ended up talking to all of the girls about their mom. And they're now 8, 6 to be 11, and 12. And so more to the fact of why he's like he is, that mommy didn't just go missing, that there was some bad people that did bad things to their mommy, you know. Because we know they're already getting on Google. They've got pictures, and we ask them where you got those pictures from, and we Googled mommy's name. Yeah. So they're Googling mommy's name, so they're going to read all of the stuff that all these people have said that's not true. So I told them, no matter what you read about your mom, you remember your mom, and you remember who she was. So if it sounds like a lie, like this fake news that's going on today, which they know of, it is a lie. It is a lie. If it doesn't sound like your mom, it wasn't your mom, because people say things and the media says things to where people will listen, and it's not true, because I don't want them to read all this stuff and think that that was their mom, because it wasn't. So.
Yeah, that's the tough thing, that you can only keep things from kids so long these days, you know, especially if it has to do with a crime or anything. They're, you know, before the internet, 1980s or something, you might be able to do that for a little while longer. But if they're getting online, going to Google, and if they're curious, they're going to find out. So you might as well tell it to them yourself, yourself.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And let them know that anything that doesn't sound right isn't right. You know, at least they'll know that when they read this stuff about her being a drifter and a meth user and all the other stuff that's out there.
Right. Now, obviously, you've done a lot of work on this. In fact, you live up in that area. You've gone to these locations. You took me to some. We were in Terry McDowell's driveway. We went to the convenience store. We were on the road where Terry's truck allegedly got stuck, allegedly where Lacey disappeared. We met at that restaurant, which is right across the street, basically, from Terry's. And I know just from being up there that these people, when walking in, they've seen you there before. You know, people know who you are and know what you are doing up there now. Right. What has this been like for you? And have you ever been afraid? Have you ever been threatened? I mean, what have the last 6.5 years been like?
I have been afraid. Lacey's best friend a couple of years ago posted on Facebook. She called them all out by name, called them all out. And it really made a lot of people angry. And so I quit having my vigils. And I have been scared, you know. I did go and take a class and it's either feast or famine. I mean, I either go out there or I don't,
Yeah.
and now I'm to the point that I'll still go out there, but it's always in a public place if I can, to take more flyers like we did whenever you were there.
Sure.
But it definitely is. It's scary. These are some crazy people that can do this to somebody and live every day like they've never done nothing. But I'm sure they don't. I'm sure it's in their heart. It's got to be.
So you've been afraid. I mean, have you ever been threatened? Have you ever gotten somebody ever big to get in your face or anything? Nothing like that.
Well, now there was one girl. Now Jennifer, she didn't get in my face, but she told Matt Maynard. Matt told me that she told him that I cornered her one day at a restaurant that I was at. Well, I didn't corner her. I walked up and told her what I had been told about her. And I wanted her to tell me different, if it's different, And I didn't corner her at all. But she was telling him that I cornered her. But I didn't, I mean, I'm not going to corner nobody.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to say that I haven't gotten one or two of them and put them in the truck so they'd talk to me. But they did talk to me when we got them out of the woods,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, as far as scared, not really. I don't live every day scared. I'm still so pushed to try to find her. And I've talked to so many people, good people out there. There are good people out there too,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it just makes me sick. It just makes me totally sick at my stomach.
And I'm going to remind the listeners, this is from a woman who is not Lacey's mother. She is the mother of the father of Lacey's children. Essentially, you're essentially Lacey's mother-in-law, and you've been working on this for 6.5 years. Of course, you have a real job, but when you're not doing that, you're doing this.
Yeah.
Right?
We never stop.
Okay.
We never stop.
Why don't you give out to the listeners any place that people can find you on Facebook? If you have a website, Facebook page, please give that information out right now to the listeners if you could.
Okay. We started a new Facebook page about a year ago, I think it was, and it's called Where Is Lacey, Lacey, Marie Buenfil, and that's Buenfil. Okay. Where is Lacey Marie Buenfil?
Okay.
My Facebook page is just Cindy Fox, CyndeeFox.
Okay. All right. And I'm going to check to see if you are part of the Unfound Podcast discussion group. Are you in there or are you not? Do you know?
I think I am.
Okay.
I am.
Great. Well, then listeners will be able to find you there. And if you're not, you will surely be in there by the time that they are listening to this interview. So we have the Facebook page. You're on there. You're easy to find on there. So people can go check that out. Of course, there's a lot of articles out there about Lacey's disappearance. But as everybody's heard in this episode, maybe a lot of that information isn't correct or is incomplete. So we have to keep that in mind. But any last words before we complete this interview, Cindy?
No, I just want to thank you for trying to help because we need help.
Well, I have to say that it seems that you've been doing pretty fine without me with all the information that I saw. So you're digging as hard as anybody out there, and you have to keep in mind, Cindy, that in my world, Lacey's disappearance isn't that old. I know that the last almost 7 years have felt like 30 years or 40 years, 50 years. But
Right.
But the average age of a case I do is like 20 years old. And that's what I'm trying to do is to make sure all these newer cases don't get that old. So I hope I can help.
Right, exactly.
But
I hope you can too.
But I think you've been doing pretty good without my services. I obviously hope that it helps. But
well, we just haven't got anywhere, though. I mean, we've gathered a lot of stuff, but we haven't gotten anywhere,
Yeah, but I know, but it seems to me, just looking at it, you're further ahead now than you were a year ago. You got to talk to Matt Maynard in some of these things, and you got the police's
Right.
attention and everything. That's a
True.
lot more than a year ago.
True.
You know.
True, and they did search 3 bodies of water. Oh, and one more thing. Where I always had my command center set up at
Yeah.
Nelson's Fish Camp.
Yep.
They actually dove that water this year, and on a tip, and they there's men that sit there at the fish camp all the time. They sit there and watch people come in and out, and those men told me. Because the sheriff's office wouldn't tell me what they found. So I left the sheriff and went to Nelson's, and they told us that they found a pistol, that they pulled a pistol out of the water. So I don't know for sure if they did, but they said that's what it looked like to them, to the men that were sitting there.
Okay.
So.
All right, maybe that has something to do with Lacey's case. We have to hope.
Maybe so. Maybe so. We hope so.
Well, Cindy, it's been my pleasure to get to meet you and your husband. And unfortunately, I forget the name of the other woman that was with you that day. Who was she?
Shannon. Shannon. She is my right hand. She is my right and left hand.
Okay. Well, please give her a shout out if you could. I apologize to Shannon for forgetting her name, but she's been helping you with this, with all of this.
Day one.
Since day
even
one.
more than what I do. She does more than I do, to be honest with you.
Okay.
But she knew Lacey too. They were close.
Okay, so Shannon as well. I got to meet all of you about 6 weeks ago. We went to all these different places. We had a great lunch at that little diner in that little town. Really enjoyed it and had a great day.
Yes.
And I hope I hope we can get together again soon. That would be cool.
Well, thank you, Ed. That would be great. And like I said, I just thank you for taking the time to try to help us. We really, really, really need it, and we really appreciate you.
Cindy, you're very welcome. And I deeply appreciate you being on this episode of Unfound.
Thank you so much. I look forward to anything else in the future, honey.
Okay. You're welcome. Thanks.
And that was my interview with Cindy Fox, for all intents and purposes, mother-in-law of Lacey Buenfil. I thank her for joining me and all of you on this episode. As Cindy and I noted during the interview, she took me to many of the locations mentioned during our discussion. The Crazy 8 Bar, the Denver Norris property, that's where the abandoned trailer pics come from that I've posted, the Citgo convenience store, then the location of where Terry's truck allegedly got stuck, and we even drove down Terry McDowell's driveway. And to reiterate, these locations are not really close to each other. I posted satellite pics of the locations in the Unfound podcast discussion group, so you can see where they are in relation to each other. So, I think you can now understand why the theme of this episode is down the rabbit hole, and how do we get back up the rabbit hole. You heard all sorts of rumors and beliefs and all sorts of names, all from a bunch of people who have no credibility and no reason to tell the truth. That as soon stab each other in the back while protect each other at the same time. And as the meth and opiate epidemics spread, these stories are only going to get more common. But that's not the only problem with this disappearance. The other problem is Terry McDowell's story of Lacey just walking off into the Ocala National Forest is just within the realm of believability, especially considering she might have been high at the time. It'd be very easy to understand how she got lost. Hey, David Paulides has made an entire career talking about how people go missing in our national parks. Yet I can't get something out of my mind, and it really didn't occur to me until the last few days, even though I've known about this case for 2 months. Would Terry McDowell, known criminal, known meth cooker, known leader of a bunch of meth heads, really go through all the trouble of driving out into the middle of nowhere, get his truck stuck, inconvenience all these people to pick him up in the middle of nowhere, just for the purpose of creating a ruse that Lacey disappeared in the Ocala National Forest? That has to be one of the most extravagant, complicated, and contrived alibis for a disappearance I have ever heard. Not to mention that nobody in Terry McDowell's orbit has ever disappeared despite this entire group's reputation. So it's not like they and he have experience covering up a planned or accidental death. Would it not have just been easier, and probably just as effective, to say Lacey walked off his back porch and never came back? Because that's what Terry ended up telling the cops anyway when they came to take Lacey's car. Terry said she was a drifter with a drug problem who would leave for days at a time. So then why create this whole Ocala National Forest story? Because if we're going to believe one of the other stories, that Chris Thornton killed her, or she died at the hospital, or she died on Denver Norris's property, that means Terry McDowell by himself went out to the Ocala National Forest, got his truck stuck, waited there for hours, then called friends to come get him and tow his truck away. Moreover, when the cops showed up the next day, whether Venus called them or he did, why did he not then use that ruse as an explanation for Lacey's disappearance? Because that's why he would have done it in the first place, because he would have known eventually that the cops would come calling once somebody reported Lacey missing. Instead, it doesn't seem Terry brought up the Ocala National Forest story until other people started talking about it to the police, mainly the people who picked him up and got the truck out of the mud. It was only then that Terry mentioned the Ocala National Forest, that he and Lacey were out there and she walked away. So the question is, why would Terry McDowell resist telling the police his fake alibi for Lacey's disappearance for so long when he created the fake alibi for that expressed purpose in the first place? It's very, very hard to understand. But as convoluted as this all sounds, somewhere in here is the way up the rabbit hole. I'm sure of it. I'll leave the rest of the theorizing up to you. Now listen to my interview with Stephen Huba from the Tribune Review as we talk about the disappearance of Devin Brown Bucetta.
I'm so happy to welcome back to Unfound Stephen Huba from TribLive.com and Trib Total Media in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Steve, how are you?
I'm good, Ed, and good to be back with you.
Okay. This month, this coming Sunday, just a few days from when the people are listening to us talk, you're going to have an article on the disappearance of Devin Brown Bucetta. And that's a disappearance that happened in the Mount Washington area of Pittsburgh. Why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about the case and who you got to talk to?
Yeah, this is another case that really didn't get a whole lot of attention at the time that Devin disappeared back in 2006.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, we're talking 12 years ago.
Yes.
And, with Unfound, we've been trying to focus on cases, with a few exceptions, that have been underreported.
Yep.
And I would say that's the case with this one. And as you mentioned, she had been living in Mount Washington, which is a neighborhood of Pittsburgh, high up on top of the hill overlooking downtown.
Yep.
It's a really lovely area. And she wasn't living there very long. She originally was from the Orlando, Florida area and had moved to Pittsburgh with her new husband, who apparently had connections in the Pittsburgh area. And she only lived here, I would say, about a year before she disappeared.
Wow. And it's kind of unusual for disappearance because the way I perceive it is Mount Washington area does not seem to me to be a dangerous, quote unquote dangerous area. There are surely some scarier neighborhoods in Pittsburgh. Mount Washington isn't necessarily one of them.
Right.
At least my perception, in case anybody who has never been there. So what are some of the general facts of her disappearance?
Well, she was last seen by a maintenance man who had come to her apartment to do some repair work. And when her apartment was searched later on, the way it was described was everything had pretty much been left the way the maintenance man had remembered seeing it. which indicated that it looked like she had just left to maybe go run a short errand.
Yeah.
And come right back. And she never came back. And her family really didn't start to show concern until, and this was, by the way, in September 2006. September 5th was, I believe, the last day she was seen. And September 18th was the birthday of her daughter. And her daughter was kind of a long story, but her daughter was living back down in Florida, and she didn't make any connection with her daughter for her birthday on the 18th.
Yeah, that would be a bad sign for sure.
That was and that was a real red flag for the family. And then, not too long after that, Devon's car was found at a nearby gas station. And apparently they had received some sort of notice in the mail that the car had been towed and that somebody from the family should get the car.
Yeah.
So once that was conveyed to the family, that's when they filed a missing person report and got the Pittsburgh police involved.
Okay. It's I just have to point this out. She was living by herself, but she had moved to Pittsburgh because she got married. I just have to ask, was there some problem in the marriage? Were they getting divorced? They weren't living together anymore? Did you explore that any when you talked to, I guess it was Devon's aunt?
That's right. I interviewed Devon's aunt, and who is very close in age to Devon, and they were essentially raised together, so they were very close. But oddly enough, the family really didn't know her husband very well, and they weren't married very long, for maybe about a year. So she was, as I understand it, she was already divorced or in the process of getting divorced at the time of her disappearance.
Okay.
And her husband or ex-husband then moved back down to Florida. But the family was really not all that clued in on this relationship. At least her aunt did not even ever meet her husband.
Interesting.
And so there just wasn't a lot of awareness on the part of the family regarding this marriage, and apparently the marriage wasn't that good and didn't last very long.
Okay.
And so, I mean, there were things in Devon's life that were not going well, including the end of her marriage, the loss of a job, and then her child going back down to Florida.
Right. So she had a lot of things going on then. Seems.
Yeah, personal things, but whether any of those things shed light on her disappearance has never really been proven. And the Pittsburgh police have interviewed her ex-husband, but never identified him as a suspect.
Okay.
So,
okay,
a lot of question marks.
Okay, we're doing this interview actually on October 23rd, 2018, so about 3 days before everybody will hear this interview. You told me that you're going to actually be talking possibly to a couple other people for the article. You've already talked to your aunt. Who are some other people maybe that you're planning to maybe get reached? We can't guarantee anything, of course, but maybe a couple other people that you were thinking about talking to or trying to talk to.
Well, definitely someone from Pittsburgh police, and also possibly another family member or two.
Okay, great. That sounds like a pretty complete article that'll be in the Sunday. Do you think, being that you mentioned right at the beginning that this case didn't get a lot of attention, could it be because maybe Devon wasn't from the Pittsburgh area, didn't have a lot of didn't have any family there? Do you think that might have played a factor in looking back at that?
Yeah, that's actually a good point, and I think that's very plausible. That she just didn't know that many people up here. She did work for an organization. Some people may remember it, called Acorn.
Yeah, political organization. Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And that's an acronym. And I don't believe that Acorn exists anymore, but she did work for them for a time, helping clients who were in danger of losing their homes due to foreclosure, because this was around the time.
Sure.
Not too long before the whole mortgage crisis
Ure.
happened.
Yep.
And,
absolutely.
So she did have a job, and she did have some friends, but other than that, her connections up here were pretty scarce.
Okay. Well, it sounds like a good case. I know that, we started talking about maybe covering some more recent cases. Of course, as everybody already knows, we went all the way back to the 1960s a couple months ago. This was not a case that I had heard of in the Pittsburgh area. And it does seem like there's some leads that still can be covered. And it's really good that we were able to locate her aunt, who doesn't live in Pennsylvania but lives down here in Florida near me. So I feel very fortunate that we were able to track her down, and you were able to talk to her. That was really fortunate.
Yeah, I do too, and I feel like this is another one of those cases that could really benefit from some renewed exposure.
Yes, I agree. I agree completely. Absolutely. Well, it sounds like that's a good one, Steve. And I remind everybody it'll be in this Sunday's Tribune Review in the print edition, and then also at triblive.com. So that would be October 28th. And Steve, it's good to talk to you again.
Thanks, Ed. Same here.
All right, Steve, take it easy.
And once again, the article concerning the disappearance of Devin Brown Bucetta will be at triblive.com, October 28th. And that's the program. If you found it informative, please go to the app that you use to listen to Unfound and give this podcast a nice review. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've been listening to Unfound.